Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 9:30 on Monday, the 6th of March.
This is To The Point with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Illegal migrants banned from the UK for life. Rishi Sunak's tough new strategy to stop small boats crossing the channel. But will it work? Is it enough to deter those who wish to enter it illegally? We're going to be talking in the next hour to Nigel Farage, who'll give us his considered verdict.
It turns out that Matt Hancock was too worried about his reputation to change official advice on COVID rules. The disgraced former Health Secretary ignored scientific facts from Chris Whitty to cut COVID quarantine, instead joking with aides on WhatsApp about travellers locked up in hotels. This morning, Jacob Rees-Mogg joins us live for a frank conversation about what happened.
And King Charles, he's invited Harry and Meghan to that coronation in May, but will they accept? So far, they're refusing to say so. They've been evicted, of course, from their Windsor home, Frogmore House. Harry's also done just another bombshell snooze fest interview. So is there any place for the Duke and Duchess of Netflix alongside the other working royals? Don't forget, And don't forget, we want to hear from you, so you can get in touch at gbnews@gbviews.uk. But first, we're going to get the headlines with Tamsin.
Andrew, thank you. Good morning. It's 9:32. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Thousands of asylum seekers will be left permanently in limbo under proposed government plans to tackle small boats crossing the Channel. The new legislation would mean those who arrive on small boats would be prevented from claiming asylum and would be banned from returning to the UK. The Refugee Council warns the plans could shatter the UK's commitments under the UN Refugee Convention to give people a fair hearing regardless of their route to the country. The government says it's getting a grip on illegal migration and promised more safe routes for asylum seekers. Police in Wales searching for 5 people who went missing after a night out say they found 3 bodies. Gwent police say 2 others have been taken to hospital with serious injuries. They were last seen in Cardiff in the early hours of Saturday night before being reported missing. Police say the vehicle they were travelling in was involved in a road traffic collision and came off the road. The identities of those who died have not yet been released. Peers and MPs are warning the Prime Minister's strike bill is likely in breach of the European Convention on Human Rights. The proposals aim to ensure minimum working standards during industrial action across 6 sectors, including health and transport. But a report by the Cross-Party Joint Committee on Human Rights has called on the government to reconsider the legislation. Today is expected to be the coldest day of the year so far as freezing Arctic air sweeps the UK. Temperatures will plummet to lows of -3 in Scotland and -2 in the northwest and east of England today and tomorrow. The yellow warnings in place are also for snow and ice. The Met Office says conditions are likely to cause some travel disruption as well as some power outages. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Bev and Andrew.
Well, welcome back. This is To The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Still to come in the next hour, we're going to be joined by GB News presenter Nigel Farage to give his take on the lockdown files. But first,
to our main story today, the Prime Minister is finally announcing new laws to ban people arriving in Britain by small boats across the Channel.
The government is expected to put forward a £3 billion plan and a bill that will enable the Home Secretary to remove anyone using irregular routes into the UK as soon as practical to a safe third country. Meanwhile, a human rights break could be used to stop lawyers from interfering with deportation flights.
Well, joining us in the studio for more is GB News' very own Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood. Tom, good morning. Priti Patel, who's the former Home Secretary, she's already said this isn't going to work.
It's interesting. There were sources close to Priti Patel over the weekend putting out reservations around this, although it has to be said Priti Patel herself has rode back a little bit on that this morning. So clearly some behind-the-scenes conversations going on there. Perhaps the comments over the weekend were closer to what Priti Patel actually believes, and there may have been some strong arming. I'm not sure. I'm not one to speculate. But the clear thing that the government is putting forward in some briefings that it's already made, although we won't see the full detail of the legislation until likely tomorrow. This is about making sure that people who apply or who get into the country by irregular routes, by illegal means, small boats and the like, that they will not be able to settle in this country, that they will be swiftly deported, and swiftly is key here, but also not be able to return if they've been deported for a lifetime, not be able to visit on holiday or claim citizenship in this country.
And they're going to take them to safe countries like Rwanda and another. What's the other safe country? We haven't managed to get one single plane to Rwanda since that policy was announced last summer.
We haven't. There are still legal processes going on, and although the latest round of legal battles was won by the government, this is still a very long road to go. However, there are some returns agreements that the UK government has negotiated with other countries. They'll be looking to create more of those, but of course those sort of ideas that have been put forward are not yet in fruition in many, many countries around the world. The crucial crucial thing that the UK government will be trying to do, though, is not just the harsher rules for those who are coming here, but also speeding up the processing of those who have arrived illegally. There are currently over 160,000 people waiting for their claims to be assessed. And if we think about the numbers that came across last year, 45,000 illegally, clearly these people are waiting years and years to even have that assessment. Speeding that up and getting those deportations done faster will make the system go more rationally. And this is in concert with also creating new legal routes. Because for some people claiming asylum from some other parts of the world, they feel like there's no way to get to the United Kingdom legally without making these dangerous journeys. And so it's a sort of two-pronged approach there, making sure that there is that legal way to do it, but for those that break the rules and circumvent that legal way, that they are dealt with properly.
Unite Union ambulance strikes planned for this week, Tom, called off now. Why?
Well, I think this is all to do with the budget, which we're expecting in just a couple of weeks' time. Clearly, there is going to be some more money found for these different public sector services.
Is it going to be a lump sum, do you think, rather than an increase in the basic pay, a lump sum, one-off?
It's a really difficult thing to judge because, of course, that happened in Scotland and that did have some success in calling off some of those strikes. The UK government has until this point always spoken about the 2023-2024 pay round, whereas the unions have wanted to talk about what went on in 2022-23, backdated pay. Now, how you achieve that is a big question, and up until now, the government has not been wanting to talk about how to do backdated pay. However, of course, £30 billion was found down the back of a sofa just a couple of weeks ago by off calculations by the OBR, higher than expected tax receipts and lower than expected cost of the energy price guarantee as international energy prices have come down. That money, I think, would be very, very surprising if it were not put forward to resolving some of these employment disputes.
News this morning about Stanley Johnson, that his son has nominated him for a knighthood.
Yes.
Go on, Tom, give us the background to this.
Well, whenever a Prime Minister leaves office, they get what are called resignation honours. Now, for David Cameron, he nominated around 60 people who became peers, who got knighthoods, and the rest of it, MBEs. The same was true of Theresa May, around 60. We're hearing that Boris Johnson has nominated around 100 individuals to get these gongs in his resignation honours. And currently they're going through a Cabinet Office process of making sure that they're all right and proper. And that means that we're getting some leaks. One of those 100 individuals is the Prime Minister's father, who is said to be getting a knighthood. Now, of course, the Prime Minister's father, Stanley Johnson, is a figure in his own right. He's been on I'm a Celebrity. He appears quite often in the media.
Doesn't tend to get you a knighthood going on I'm a Celebrity,
This is true. I think what will likely be the cause of this knighthood is services to the environment or something similar, because of course he is a patron of the Conservative Environment Network.
Is it sustainable? Because Boris Johnson's already put his brother Joe in the House of Lords, which caused a huge fight last time because he'd stood down in Parliament, put him in the House of Lords because he felt guilty. Now I'm giving his father a knighthood. Is he going to give his sister Rachel something too? Is it going to be something for the whole family?
Well, there are 4 Johnson siblings.
There are.
And of course Stanley as well. So it's interesting because Boris Johnson's office is saying we do not comment on resignation honour process. And to some extent, we're only taking what these leaks are saying at face
have a ring
value.
Of authenticity about it, doesn't it?
It does, and this is a tricky point for Boris Johnson, of course, as of course we're expecting this this parliamentary investigation into whether or not he misled Parliament to come about in Parliament in the next couple of weeks as well. This mood music around the propriety of Boris Johnson is certainly a challenge, and if we're to believe all of this speculation that Boris Johnson fancies another go at the top job, he might want to think about more fulsome answers than the no comment that we're currently getting.
Yeah, it's just horribly out of touch with the public at a time when the Conservative Party are just in the quagmire of allegations about nepotism during the COVID times. to nominate your father for a knighthood.
People might say that David Cameron nominated his hairdresser for a similar
And they'd be
award.
right too.
But it was only the titchy one, wasn't it? It was an MBE or something. It wasn't a knighthood.
It was, but I think the same point stands whenever prime ministers leave office. There is sort of this sort of almost silly round of gongs that are giving out to people close to them.
The famous one was Harold Wilson's, and it was called the Lavender List because his private secretary Marcia Falkender wrote all these gongs, and they were for all sorts of weird and wonderful, and people. It was effectively rewarding donors and the like. Boris's honours list sounds like it could be a rival for the Lavender List.
Well, I think we all look with great anticipation towards the full list, because of course
it's only a matter of time.
No, I'm definitely not on it.
Of course, we've only got drips and drabs so far.
No, I don't want to be a Knight of the Realm, thank you.
Are you sure?
No,
you could join the likes of Sir Tony Blair.
Yeah, but there's the other one. Talk of nice. A 29-year-old member of his team is going to go to the House of Lords, apparently. 29. A baroness. What's her name?
Ross Kempsell
is going to get a peerage.
Yes.
At 29.
Well, he is a distinguished journalist before he went into Number 10 and was...
You can't be that distinguished at 29.
Distinguished-ish.
No such thing.
Yeah.
Well, to some extent, there are people who argue the House of Lords is too old, too stuffy. Perhaps there should be some fresh blood in there.
The answer to the House of Lords is to close it down and think of something else, because it is really full of some weird and wonderful. And I go in there sometimes and I say, "Oh, who are you visiting?" They say, "No, I'm a member." I thought, how did they get in here?
Yeah.
All prime ministers are as bad.
I don't know. If we look back to the 1700s, of course, the House of Lords was full of people of sort of 18, 19, 20. The House of Commons had a prime minister at the age of 26.
I wonder if he's the first former prime minister to nominate his dad, though. He's got to be the first.
I think so.
Yeah, I think in history it's been...
That's historical. That's going to be a good pub quiz chat.
Yeah.
Fact.
I think in history it tends to be prime ministers who nominate their children for things.
That's right.
So perhaps it's a bit of a turnaround for that.
Can we talk about Sue Gray just for a moment? So it is a bit of a disaster, isn't it? Tom, if people haven't caught this story over the weekend, what's happened?
Well, Sue Gray, the senior civil servant, has been poached by the leader of the Labour Party to become his chief of staff. Now, this hasn't happened yet. There's a process that now needs to take place. But there are some big questions about this appointment. Namely, how close has Sue Gray been to the Labour Party, particularly while she was carrying out that famous investigation into Boris Johnson? One of the things that brought him down, to what extent was she related to the Labour Party while this was going on? And there are big questions now that the Labour Party has not yet answered in terms of when did conversations between Sue Gray and Sir Keir Starmer's team begin? Did they begin while that report was being written?
I was watching George Osborne talking about this yesterday, and he was saying that she's not a particularly party political person. She doesn't feel that visceral loyalty to any particular party. So that's probably OK, isn't it?
But he said that, but then she's now joining the leader of the Labour Party, the most overtly political appointment. And it's very rare for a senior civil servant to be allowed to go straight into a job that political. And in fact, when she was in charge of civil service ethics and propriety, she stopped a woman from the Number 10 Honours Unit going to the House of Lords for a year.
Right.
Because she said it looked too uncomfortable. There's a fascinating letter in the Times today from Lord Renwick, former ambassador to Washington, who said the appointment is a mistake. And I think he's right. And a lot of Labour people think that, Tom.
That's certainly true. We've seen a lot of people that were closer to the sort of Corbyn sphere of Labour politics saying that this is improper, that this doesn't pass the smell test, that if you're trying to offer a government of integrity and clean politics, doing this with very murky details in terms of when these conversations began is not a good look at the very least.
It's also a gift in this sense, isn't it? It gives Boris and his people a chance to say, see, that whole Sue Gray investigation was a stitch-up, and that's what they're saying.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. More from you later. OK, now, police in Wales searching for 3 women and 2 men have now found 3 of them dead and 2 seriously injured.
The 5 people reported missing after a night out in Cardiff over the weekend. The authorities say 2 of them have gone to hospital with serious injuries.
So joining us now is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Good morning, Mark. I went to bed last night. I saw this headline that these 3 girls were missing. As the mother of teenagers, your heart is in your mouth when your children go out of the door on a night out. I woke up this morning to say that very sadly their bodies had been found. Awful.
Yeah, an absolute shocker. And a big question really for the authorities here, because it's clear now that these people were lying fatally or seriously injured in that vehicle for 2 days. And the families, quite rightly, of those who died will probably be asking the question, if they had been found a day or so earlier, could that have made a difference? Could they have been saved?
So presumably it's a car that's gone off a road. They were in Wales. You have a lot of country roads with those steep bankings. Yeah. The car has disappeared. 2 other people, 2 young men that were in that car, they're in hospital, I believe.
Well, we don't know if that's the case. I think one of those in hospital is actually one of the young women. So we don't have the all of the identities of those injured and dead as yet. That will come out later in the day. But this group had been in Newport on Friday night. They'd been seen in a club. We're told that they then travelled in their vehicle 45 miles down to Porthcawl, where they were seen at a caravan park in the town. Before then turning around, they were back in Cardiff until the early hours of Saturday morning. Then they headed back out of Cardiff, we're told, and then just disappeared off the radar, went completely dark, and no messages on social media, phone calls to family, anything like that. And of course, members of their family were extremely concerned, alerted the police. But we know now, 2 days before actually any trace of them was found. And that is the key question. That's why Gwent Police, who was the force that was alerted to these missing people initially, has now referred itself to the Independent Office for Police Conduct to see whether more could have been done to try to find this vehicle in a more timely.
Because one of the mothers has been saying the police weren't taking her concerns seriously, and she was trying to say this isn't normal. She doesn't just go out clubbing on the weekend and not come home for all this length of time. So the mother got in the car and drove around roads trying to find them.
Yeah, the vehicle was found on off the A48 just outside Cardiff. It clearly had been covered to some extent, gone off the road. So not, had it been visible, members of the public would have called in. However, of course, this mother saying, my concerns were not taken seriously. There's all kinds of things the police can do with checking ANPR, the automatic number plate recognition cameras, normal CCTV cameras. They can ping phones to get a geographical location of where those phones were. They were presumably still switched on and working because, those on board wouldn't have had time to switch the phones off. So they would have been able potentially to have had a geographic location of which they could have then began a search, because that would have shown them actually the phone's not moving, it's static at this location.
Do we know just finally anything about the condition of the 2 in hospital?
Seriously injured is what we're told, and you would expect that to be the case if they've been lying out in the open in sub-zero temperatures for the past 2 nights. And as I say, the key question that the families of those who have died will have is, look, 2 days passed, could my loved one have been saved if the emergency services had got to them a day, almost 2 days earlier?
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mark. Awful story.
Now, the most notorious prisoner in Britain, he's called Charles Bronson, you've probably heard of him, there's been a film about him, will appear before a parole board as he makes his latest bid to win freedom after 49 years behind bars.
The inmate, who became renowned for his violence in prison, becomes the second person in UK legal history to have his case heard in public.
Well, joining us for more is GB News London reporter Lisa Hartle. Good morning, Lisa. What more do we know? And is he going to actually appear in himself?
No, he's going to be appearing by video link from prison. So won't be here actually in himself. But he was originally given a 7-year sentence for armed robbery. Over time, that sentence has been increased after several different violent episodes in prison, whether that's been against other inmates or prison staff. In 1999, he held an art teacher hostage for 2 days in Hull prison. And whilst he didn't physically harm him, the teacher was left so traumatised he's never been able to return to work. But he's had many parole bids in the past. They've all been turned down because of his violent behaviour in prison. His lawyers are going to argue that it's been 8 years since his last conviction and 4 years since he displayed any other signs of violence. The parole board will be hearing from all of the different things that Bronson has done over the years, hearing from staff that he worked with in prison, and also hearing from Bronson himself. He's currently assessed as a medium risk to staff and inmates, but still a Category A prisoner held at Wood Hill Prison near Milton Keynes. The hearing is expected to last 3 days and a decision made in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We will keep you posted with that, of course, here on GB News. Our London reporter, Lisa Hartle, there.
I saw that film on Tom Hardy. It was horrible. He's a really repulsive, monstrous person.
Not Tom Hardy.
Definitely Tom Hardy. Who do I mean? What's
Just
his name?
to be clear, Charles Bronson.
He was played by Tom Hardy. He was played by Tom Hardy, and he got into the character very well. But I mean, he's just violent.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I sort of, it's very naive perhaps, but I sort of trust the authorities at this point to know whether these people should be allowed out or not.
Yeah.
Only they can know, I guess.
I'm not sure I would trust them, though. Remember John Warboys, the taxi rapist? They wanted to let him out.
Yeah.
There was a backlash, and people raised money, and there was a judicial review, and it was blocked. Carrie Johnson was, of course, involved in that. Because he was one of her victims.
Carrie Johnson?
Yeah. She was in his cab.
Boris Johnson's missus?
Was drugged by him. She doesn't think he actually assaulted her, but she waived her right to anonymity to take him on to make sure he was never free from prison. I did not know that. Yeah.
Let us know what you think about all the stories we're talking about today. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We've got Jacob Rees-Mogg still to come on the show this morning. Nigel Farage is going to be popping in here as well. And David Davis.
David Davis, former Brexit Secretary. He'll have quite a lot to say, of course, about the Windsor Framework, the new deal put forward by Rishi Sunak.
And talking of Windsor, we're also going to be discussing whether Prince Harry and Meghan Markle will accept the invitation to King Charles's coronation. We'll see you in a minute.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst. Welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. The week ahead, well, it's looking cold for many of us. We will see some snow, particularly in the north, but quite widely frost and ice. So looking at the bigger picture, and we have northerly winds being introduced from the Arctic right across the UK, so it will feel cold over the next few days with the risk of snow in places too. This morning it is a chilly start across many areas. There's quite a lot of clouds, some showery outbreaks of rain across England and Wales, sunny spells elsewhere, but already snow showers moving in across parts of Scotland. Met Office warning for snow and ice, so some tricky travelling conditions over the next few days here. Cold feeling afternoon, particularly across the northern half of the UK here. Temperatures really struggling at 2 to 5 Celsius. Further south, 7 to 9, perhaps 10 in the far south of England initially, but even here temperatures will start slipping away later on into the evening time. Under the clearer skies, temperatures quickly falling below freezing this evening. Further snow showers across Scotland, Northern Ireland and northeast England too. The risk of some patchy rain and snow also moving into southern parts of Wales, southern England, but there's a bit of uncertainty with this, so do stay tuned to the forecast, but temperatures widely below freezing, so some icy stretches to take us into Tuesday morning. Early rain and snow across southern counties should start to push away. Elsewhere, cold, a sunny, frosty, icy start to the day. Further snow showers through Tuesday across northern Scotland into Northern Ireland and northeast England, but plenty of sunny spells too. And with that northerly wind, it will be a cold feeling day for everyone, 2 to 5 Celsius generally for many. Over the next few days, it does stay very chilly. We will continue to see the risk of snow, particularly across northern and eastern parts of the UK. There are signs as we get to Friday, it'll just start to turn a little bit less cold as weather systems start to move in from the Atlantic. I'll see you again soon.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 10 o'clock on Monday, the 6th of March.
This is To The Point with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Coming up, those illegal migrants banned from the UK for life. Rishi Sunak's tough new strategy to stop small boats crossing the channel. But will it work? We're going to be talking to Nigel Farage to get his reaction. Also, David Davis, the former Brexit secretary.
It turns out that Matt Hancock was too worried about his reputation to change official advice on COVID rules. The disgraced former health secretary ignored scientific facts from Chris Whitty to cut COVID quarantine, instead joking with aides on WhatsApp about travellers being locked up in hotels. This morning, Jacob Rees-Mogg joins us live for a frank conversation on what happened.
And the coronation. King Charles has invited Harry and Meghan. Of course he has. But they've refused to say so far if they're going to turn up. We know they've been evicted from their Windsor home, and Harry's done yet another snooze fest interview. So is there any place for the Duke and Duchess of Netflix alongside the working royals?
All of that and a lot more. Send us your views as well, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first of all, here is the news with Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thank you, and good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 1 minute past 10. Thousands of asylum seekers will be left permanently in limbo under new proposed government plans to tackle small boats crossing the Channel. The new legislation would mean those who arrive on boats would be prevented from claiming asylum and would be banned from returning to the UK. The Refugee Council has warned the plans could shatter the UK's commitments under the UN Refugee Convention to give people a fair hearing regardless of their route to the country. The government says it's getting a grip on illegal migration and promised more safe routes for asylum seekers. Immigration lawyer Skylar McKeith says there will be challenges with the new legislation.
Individuals must not be left in limbo while waiting for third countries to agree to admit them. So we could potentially see issues here with UK arrivees being left in limbo, waiting for safe third countries to admit them. It's a positive step forward on the Prime Minister's part. He's committed to clearing the initial asylum decision backlog, but it's potentially going to be very problematic because it may very well be incompatible with international laws.
Police in Wales searching for 5 people who went missing after a night out say they found 3 bodies. Gwent police say 2 people have been taken to hospital with serious injuries. They were last seen in Cardiff in the early hours of Saturday night before being reported missing. Police also say the vehicle they were travelling in was involved in a collision. The identities of those who have died have not yet been confirmed. Head of news at Wales Online, Kieran Jones, says it was out of character for the group to go off-grid.
We were last seen in the Llanedin area of the city in the early hours of Saturday morning. Then from about 2 a.m. on Saturday, there's just no further contacts, no social media activity, no correspondence with family, friends, loved ones. And obviously over the weekend, those family and friends and loved ones have been understandably very, very concerned. It's entirely out of character, they say, for these 5 people to kind of go entirely off-grid, if you like.
Peers and MPs are warning the Prime Minister's strike bill is likely in breach of the European Convention on Human Rights. The proposals aim to ensure minimum working standards during industrial action across 6 sectors, including health and transport. But a report by the Cross-Party Joint Committee on Human Rights has called on the government to reconsider the legislation. The warning comes as the Unite union has called off the latest upcoming ambulance strikes in England in order to hold pay talks with the government. The industrial action had been due to take place today and Wednesday. Former Met police officer Wayne Couzens will be sentenced later today for indecent exposure. The 50-year-old is already serving a whole life sentence for the murder of marketing executive Sarah Everard in 2021. He'll be sentenced today for 3 incidents of flashing which took place before he killed Miss Everard, to which he pleaded guilty last month. Boris Johnson has reportedly put his father forward for a knighthood as part of his resignation honours list. The Times newspaper reports Stanley Johnson has been nominated for the honour. The appointment raises questions after the former Prime Minister's nominated his brother Joe Johnson for a peerage in 2020. But the Science Secretary, Michelle Donlan, called the claim speculation and said there were bigger fish to fry. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have received an official invitation to King Charles's coronation. It's understood they've been in email correspondence with the King's office over whether they will attend or not. Following the release of Prince Harry's controversial memoir Spare, it's been unclear whether or not the couple would be invited to the ceremony. The coronation will take place at Westminster Abbey on the 6th of May. Novak Djokovic has been forced to withdraw from the Indian Wells tennis tournament in California after failing to get special permission to enter the United States due to his vaccination status. International visitors are required to have received 2 jabs against coronavirus, but the world's number 1 is unvaccinated. The country's restrictions are due to end next month, and the tennis star had been hoping for a special exemption as the tournament starts on Wednesday. Today is expected to be the coldest day of the year so far as freezing Arctic air sweeps the UK. Temperatures will plummet to lows of -3 in Scotland and -2 in the northwest and east of England today and tomorrow. The yellow warnings in place are also for snow and ice. The Met Office says the conditions are likely to cause some travel disruption as well as some power outages. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Still to come this morning, we're going to be joined live in the studio with Jacob Rees-Mogg to speak about everything from Sue Gray to Matt Hancock to Boris Johnson's dad Stanley apparently being knighted.
To our main story today, of course, the Prime Minister is set to announce, we think we can get it as early as tomorrow, this big plan now to finally curb the fleets of small boats crossing the Channel with illegal migrants. Tom, already human rights lawyers are saying it's unworkable. Well, sources close to Priti Patel, which we suspect is Priti Patel.
Usually is.
Usually is, saying much the same. Is this much different in this plan to what we've heard before?
Well, there are some crucial differences, mainly, and the big thing that will be trumpeted by the government will be this lifetime ban on people who arrive by illegal means into the country from being able to do so again. There are going to be swifter processing, deportations to countries whereby we have agreements. So the most notable one is Rwanda, although that scheme has not got off the ground yet. The government is still pursuing it in the courts. But also, of course, the UK has returns agreements with countries like Albania. So being able to expedite that process of getting people out, and then a lifetime ban on people who have been deported from even visiting the country again or trying to gain citizenship.
Swifter processing. Well, why hasn't it been swift before?
It is remarkable, the backlog that we have in this system. 160,000 individuals. Now, given that we had 45,000 people arriving illegally last year, and that was a record high itself, it gives us a sense of how many years sometimes people have been awaiting processing. And when people are awaiting processing one way or the other, they are living off taxpayer money, because there's this statutory ban on people from working or supporting themselves while they're awaiting their claim. That means that we've got an enormous hotel bill, millions spent every day, and of course all the rest of it. It is a big problem, but of course the Prime Minister has promised to slash that backlog. That's something that is being worked through at the moment. The government has already announced a couple of things to speed up that process, ditching in-person interviews for some of those people with the highest success rate countries, and clearly this is high on the government's agenda. It's one of the Prime Minister's top 5 priorities. If the government don't get this right, if the numbers continue to rise, if the government looks like it's lost control of this crucial route into the country, it's very unlikely the Conservative Party could come anywhere close to winning the next general election.
I think they would be crushed for it. And that was the story last week, Tom, wasn't it? Taking away in-person interviews, instead you do a 10-page application, and there's about 5 countries, with the majority of people, about 95% of them will get the green light from these particular 5 countries. That's about 12,000 people, which is a huge number of people, but it doesn't really start to solve the problem in any way, shape or form, does it? You know, I'm just wondering whether we should bring in our lawyer. Harjap Singh Bangal is also here this morning. When you're listening to this plan, Harjap, what is your take on it as an immigration lawyer? Where are the fences going to be that they're going to have to jump over?
Right, OK, so the problem seems to be the small boats. There's nothing in it to tackle the small boats. So it's about a deterrent policy. You're hoping that you can deter people who are paying to come over by gangs, and not actually talking about the gangs, stopping the gang. It's almost akin to saying we're going to punish the drug users and hope that drug dealing stops. But the gangs have got to be stopped. So, and these gangs aren't new. They've been using the same route. We know where they come from. You know where they come from. They come from Calais, and they traffic to the coast of Kent for 20 years, and we can't catch these gangs.
So the Prime Minister's going to see Macron, the French President, on Friday. He's going to France, and this is going to be talked about. You have no confidence that's going to...
None at all. None at all. This is just pandering to the public, promising, selling a dream to the public and the viewers, and we know it's not going to work.
So the logic then is, in a longer-term process, he doesn't have long, the election is going to be at some point next year. In a longer-term process, the message gets out via the human traffickers to the people they're bringing over, well, I can take you on the boat, but you're never going to be allowed to stay, and you're never going to be allowed to go back and apply for status to be here again. That's the logic behind it, as in terms of it being a deterrent. When you put it like that, it does seem rather ludicrous.
Well, I guess unless they think people won't get in the boat, because they think when they get there, they could end up being deported to a safe country. Now, we know Rwanda's, nothing's happened there, but Rishi Sunak's talking about other safe countries. Maybe they're going to reveal those tomorrow when the Home Secretary talks to the House.
Well, there needs to be loads. Currently, there's about 6 to 8.
Yeah.
We've got return agreements. You can't just pick up people and dump them in countries. The country has to accept them. So why would countries accept them, first of all? Where's the incentive for that? We'd have to spend billions.
We've already sent millions to Rwanda for this, though,
for
haven't
200 spaces, and in a leaked Home Office internal document yesterday, the Home Office, despite winning the case, have admitted that there's not going to be a flight before March 2024.
No.
So
that's because people like you, Harjap, keep stopping these flights.
But the Home Office won. But the Home Office won.
Brandishing your human rights credentials.
But human rights lawyers have been around a year. And here's the key, Andrew, which a lot of people don't really perhaps realise. Under Labour in 2009, we were sending back 60,000 people a year.
How?
That dwindled down to 5,000 people in 2015 under the current government, and is now less than 2,000.
They were coming in lorries, though, weren't they?
Lorries, boats, however they were getting here, they were coming here illegally. They weren't coming here...
So what's changed?
What's changed is the Home Office is broken. We know that. It's not fit for purpose. Every year, a group of MPs called a Home Affairs Select Committee get together and tell us for the last 10 years that this machinery is not fit for the purpose that you want to use it for. What do? We paper over the cracks and resell it to the public and say, oh, we've got a brand new machinery now. The whole foundations of your building are broken. There's no point putting a new roof on it. And this is what happens. The machine, we haven't got skilled enough staff. We're employing ex-supermarket workers to decide cases. It takes 2 years to decide a case which a skilled person can decide in half a day.
But then,
the government have failed to explain why.
OK, but that might explain then why they have taken out the in-person interviews. They will say this is going to be a data tech-driven revolution to send people home. Is that going to work?
We were having, and I know because I was on the scheme, in 2002 and 2003 at Harmondsworth, there used to be a fast-track system. If an asylum seeker came in on Friday, on Monday he'd be detained. On Monday they'd be interviewed. On Wednesday they'd get a decision. On Friday an appeal would be lodged. And the court was actually in the detention centre. A judge used to sit there. He'd listen to the appeal. In 15 days, your whole case was finished. In the 17th, 18th day, you'd be sent back.
But the number of migrants that have been displaced by war and famine and climate change is dramatically higher than back then in 2002, 2003. And many of them are ending inexorably for Britain.
So make your machinery better to deal with it, rather than saying, OK, we're giving up catching the gangs. We've given up you doing a fast-track system. We've given up doing face-to-face interviews. Well, what are we actually going to do? A face-to-face interview is the best way to determine somebody's claim and the genuineness of that claim. You're giving up all of this, selling a dream to the public. What that self-form is going to end up in is going to end up in a closet amnesty. And everyone who's filling out that form is going to be granted asylum here.
An amnesty was given just a few weeks ago to 12,000.
So, but Tom, surely Rishi Sunak, the Home Office, they must know this stuff that we hear from someone like Harjap. What are they playing at? Because they've got to get this right. And if the first people, if this isn't going to even be enacted in any shape or form in a year's time, it's going to be too late.
Whenever you ask the government about how they're going to solve this issue, they say there is not one solution. They need to be a whole set of measures acting in concert. So part of it is the deterrence, and we've been discussing that a lot now, but also part of it is going after the criminal gangs, and no doubt we'll hear more about that on Friday when the Prime Minister goes off to Paris, sees praise Mr Macron and likely yet again steps up these patrols, which do stop some of the boats, but they're not as comprehensive as they could be. But also something that we've completely ignored in this conversation so far is the safe and legal routes that will be created for people coming from countries that currently have no route to legally claim asylum. Thereby, people who have a legitimate claim in this country cannot do it the legal way, feel forced to do it the illegal way, which costs us so much more and costs them so much more. So more legal routes to do things properly, perhaps offshore processing of that, would be another big part of that, and I expect the government will say more on that as well.
Might they utilise embassies and consulates abroad?
Well, one of the big questions is why aren't they doing that now?
Yeah.
And the problem is that if you open up every embassy as a centre, you might get an overwhelming number of people coming. And we know that the problems of too many people coming to our processing centres, as things stand, it gets gummed up.
But if
what we did in France,
they could get the application process there and then in the embassy and say yay or nay.
A form of that would be a very wise thing to do. We did it in France for the Ukrainian refugees coming across, and we had processing in a consulate over there. That seemed to work fairly well. So clearly there are ways to do this, and I know the government is looking at those safe and legal routes. However, of course, the headline is always going to be about deterrence because they think that works better on the doorstep.
Will it work better? Well, it might work better as a voter, but as you say, Harjap, it's not going to work for those people who want to come over. How realistic is it that that message gets through to people? You're not going to be allowed to stay.
I don't think it will matter. And I don't think it matters to the gangs who are selling a product. They're not going to highlight it as a USP in that respect. Their job is, or what they're going to do, is take money. Remember, there's more money made in people smuggling than there is in drug smuggling. You always hear about a war on drugs. We've been hearing about it. We can go and get Osama bin Laden holed up somewhere. We can get Saddam Hussein in a stronghold and go and put him on trial. We can't catch these gangs who've been operating from the same place. That's almost like saying there's a bus driver who's been driving the same bus, same route, same people for 20 years, and the government goes, don't know, can't trace it, can't trace it.
What's your suspicion? Is that because the French police think, who cares if they go across the channel, get some out of our hair?
I think there's a lack of political will to deal with this. This is the hot potato. If you want to finish your career in politics, you take on the immigration job and you take on the Home Office. We've seen it's not something people are successful at or want to do, and no one seems to have an answer because there's no specialist knowledge on the subject. It's like Tom said, there's a culmination of things that need to be done, and there's a culmination of factors, the pull factors, the push factors, and the lack of legal safe routes. That will make some sort of a difference. But even when we provide a safe route, say for the Ukrainian scheme, we saw how messed up that was. There were 2 people there eating a pack of crisps who were telling people to go back to Ukraine to apply for asylum.
Let me ask you a question, Harjap, while you're here. Let me ask you a question from one of our viewers. Brian in New Southgate has said, this new law in the planning to stop those arriving by boat from claiming a settlement, is it going to be retrospective legislation? Will it apply to those who are already here?
No, it won't be retrospective. It'll be something from new coming in. But I think what we have got to deal with is, to get this right, is faster processing, making decisions right. Remember, 50% of decisions appealed are overturned by judges because they've made the wrong decision, the Home Office. And we've got to get our borders secure in that respect and deploy. Why can't we deploy the SAS or Special Services or MI5 to catch these gangs? Surely it's a simple sort of solution.
Can I just ask Tom one last question on this, Tom? Politically, this is hugely important for the Prime Minister and the Tory government, because I think if they don't get it right, as Bev was saying, they'll be crushed and deservedly in the next election. Labour will vote against this, and the Tories will then have clear blue water. They'll say, look, we're trying to stop it, and Labour are doing nothing.
And Labour say that it's an ineffective policy, that it's just a reheated version of the Nationality and Borders Bill that was passed last year. The government is true to say that there are some differences, although clearly what the government is really trying to do here is say that this isn't a magic solution. They want to under-promise and over-deliver. And what they are saying...
politicians.
And what they are saying is that this is part of a multifaceted approach. This is one of the big strands, but there are lots of other strands as well. I suppose we'll have to wait for tomorrow to hear if they're more comprehensive on those other parts too.
Yeah, OK. Thank you both, Tom Harwood and Harjap Singh Bengal. Thank you. Good to see you guys. Now, still to come, the UK is preparing to take over from Germany and lead the NATO mission in Estonia, which borders Russia. But how much more can we stretch our military in the support for Ukraine? We'll find out in just a bit.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10:22. This is To The Point with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. Now, British pilots are set to work alongside German counterparts in a live integrated mission in Estonia for the first time.
This is, of course, as Britain prepares to take over from Germany to lead the NATO mission in Estonia, which, of course, borders Russia.
So I'm delighted to say that we are now joined in the studio by security expert Will Geddes. Will, explain this to me.
OK, so at the moment, we're obviously somewhat committed to the Ukraine conflict, as have America, and we have to partner with our partners to showing a solid and unified front. This is a new initiative, which is fundamentally us, our Royal Air Force, operating alongside the Estonian Air Force in running exercises, shall we call them, around the Estonian borders. And this is triggered somewhat, one believes, by the concerns of Putin's potential mission creep beyond Ukraine into other neighbouring NATO partner countries.
Right. So what are we doing there? We're training them.
Well, it's a bit of both. It's actually going to be running exercises. It's going to be controlling the skies above Estonia and basically lapping around those areas, sending a very strong show of force to the Russian forces that they should not even consider trying to encroach into those territories.
So we've been there for a while, or since the invasion?
Well, no, this is a new initiative. So this has been kept somewhat under wraps. There has always been this ongoing debate about a no-fly zone being invoked across, obviously, above Ukraine. The concern with that is, obviously, Ukraine don't have enough pilots, they don't have enough aircraft.
Nor do we, Will. Nor do we.
Point, Andrew. It's a
Britain
really
has got not enough tanks, not enough soldiers, not enough aircraft carriers, not enough airplanes to put on the aircraft carriers. So what are we doing, committing even more resources to another country?
OK, so this is a really valid point. So one of the concerns that there has been right from the get-go in the outset was what resources do we have to spare? What can we offer a country like Ukraine in terms of armaments, in terms of weaponry, in terms of tanks even? And the Americans have a far, far huger budget than we do. And there's been concerns, obviously, about the MOD constantly cutting budgets, obviously, for the British Army and for the various other military units. Now, there is always going to be that surplus. There is always going to be an ordering process where some of those weapons, some of that armament will be coming to its expiry period. So it's about getting rid of that surplus. So as brave and as magnanimous a gesture it might be, it is also a case of clearing out the stores before the new orders arrive. And we had this with the Challenger 2 tank, and people were talking very much about, oh, my goodness, we're offering that. Well, the Challenger 3 is already out, so they haven't been sent down there. But we're getting to a point of exhaustion, and I think this is exhaustion on a number of levels, but most especially in terms of what equipment we're prepared to give, and bearing in mind the problems we're experiencing here in the United Kingdom, the cost of living crisis, increasing fuel bills. People are going to be asking questions, particularly within the general public, to say, hang on a second, when are we going to start reinvesting in ourselves? And why are we constantly investing when possibly we can't afford it?
And people could be getting to a point soon, I think. We love Zelensky and we hate what's been happening in Ukraine, but people are getting fatigued by it.
They are.
We're committing. We've spent £7 billion already.
I don't trust Zelensky as far as I can throw him.
Well, I trust him more than I trust Putin. $7 billion we've given already.
Yeah. I mean, there is this point of exhaustion. There is this, that the original question and the original objective, mission objective, was we don't want Putin potentially to spread his power or invade other neighbouring countries and threaten other NATO partners. But having said that, we're looking at the concentration, obviously, of the conflict within Ukraine, particularly to the east of Ukraine. So there has to be an assessment as to the viability. However, this new news of, obviously, this joint collaborative operation with Estonia and with the Air Force has to raise questions as to, is there new intelligence to lead us to believe that Putin's mission is to potentially creep into those other countries? And we need to see evidence of that.
Because they were roundly, Ukraine and Zelensky was roundly recognised as being the most corrupt regime in Europe until Putin invaded. And that was already rumbling on for 8 years prior anyway, on the east of the country, wasn't it? And I think it's important to draw a distinction between the poor Ukrainian people, the lives lost, the families disseminated, lives absolutely destroyed. I want to know exactly where all that money is going. I want to know, I want an audit. How many bombs has he bought with that? I want to know. Do we have any sort of transparency?
You're not suggesting he's pinching stuff, are you?
I think we genuinely have to ask questions as to what's considered to be pinching the money and where they are spending it.
I think he's a war hero.
In a regime that
I think he's man of the year.
But did you think that before Putin invaded?
No, I thought he was a city of stand-up salesman, stand-up comic who became president by mistake, but he's proved himself as a great war leader.
I think you've got 2 points. 2 points I'd love to jump in on. The first of which I think is the audit trail. And having operated in a number of conflict zones around the world, there is always going to be seepage of money that goes to places where it perhaps shouldn't be.
Thank you, exactly.
The second side of it with Zelensky, as much as I admire him, I think we're now into a battle of egos. And this is the greatest concern. We have Putin's ego on one side and we have Zelensky's ego on the other side. I've spoken to a number of Ukrainians who aren't the biggest fans of Zelensky. And I think the concern is, where does he step down? What happens when the conflict actually ends? Is Zelensky going to still be there, or is he going to be on his world book?
And how do you decide how you've won? Because if Zelensky's to win, he's got to get the Russians out of every bit of land, including the land they pinched in 2014, by the way, in Crimea.
Absolutely.
And I don't think there's much chance of that.
But also including the Donbass area where predominantly Russian people were living already. And do you know what I mean? So, I mean, I can't help but think, well, I mean, I don't know. I'm no military expert. But when Putin said, I'm going in there to protect the Russian people in the Donbass region, and that's what I want, that's all I want, part of me thought, well, just let him have the predominantly Russian area, where they are Russian speakers. But both of you will sit there and say, well, you're incredibly naive, Bev, and that's not where he would have stopped.
No, I disagree. I agree with you. I think the biggest challenge is, where is the concession going to be made?
Exactly.
Is it going to be that the Russian forces have to be pushed entirely out of Ukraine, and Crimea is never going to happen? No. I agree with you, Andrew. The second thing is, where will Zelensky stop? How much is he prepared to concede? Has he allowed his ego, for lack of better words, to write checks that he can't cash? And he's now in a position where neither side can fundamentally come to some agreement point. And any good negotiation has to end up with both sides feeling that they've won something.
Yeah.
Do you think he's after the Nobel Prize? Is that too cynical?
Oh, I think he's had the Vogue cover, so I think that's in the pipeline.
Well, look, they gave the Nobel Prize to Obama after 2 years as president. It was a joke.
Yeah.
You remember?
Yeah.
For peace, services to peace or something? It's embarrassing.
I think what really made my blood boil was when Zelensky came out and he said, I will not negotiate at all. I will not. And he'd given up on any sort of diplomatic solution. And I thought, I'm so sorry, but when we are giving you so much of our taxpayers' money, you are not in a position to say you will not negotiate at all. Somebody has to do it on your behalf if your ego's too big to do it.
Well, I mean, there's the headlines that it generates by taking that very robust and strong stance. However, having been involved in a number of negotiations myself against somewhat evil people, I know that you never are that resolute to say we will never negotiate. I mean, even governments who say we don't negotiate with terrorists or, you know, with kidnappers, I think we all know what goes on behind the scenes.
Look at the political memoirs. Even Mrs Thatcher had very informal, arm's-length approaches with the IRA, and they tried to murder her.
Yeah, of course there has to be some of that.
You're gonna, what's that?
Well, have we got time? I wanted to ask Will about the... we're thinking about, obviously, we haven't got any time, we'll have to come back, but we are going to be talking about it in the rest of the show as well. I want to talk about the WhatsApp messages that broke over the weekend, obviously Matt Hancock's COVID files from the Daily Telegraph. We're going to be discussing this with Nigel Farage and lots more, all after your morning's news with Tamsin.
Bev, thanks very much. Good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 10:30. Thousands of asylum seekers will be left permanently in limbo under new proposed government plans to tackle small boats crossing the Channel. The new legislation would mean those who arrive on boats would be prevented from claiming asylum and would be banned from returning to the UK. The Refugee Council has warned the plans could shatter the UK's commitments under the UN Refugee Convention to give people a fair hearing regardless of their route to the country. The government says it's getting a grip on illegal migration and promised more safe routes for asylum seekers. Police in Wales searching for 5 people who went missing after a night out say they found 3 bodies. Gwent police say 2 people have been taken to hospital with serious injuries. They were last seen in Cardiff in the early hours of Saturday night before being reported missing. Police also say the vehicle they were travelling in was involved in a collision. Peers and MPs are warning the Prime Minister's strike bill is likely in breach of the European Convention on Human Rights. The proposals aim to ensure minimum working standards during industrial action across 6 sectors, including health and transport. But a report by the Cross-Party Joint Committee on Human Rights has called on the government to reconsider the legislation. Today is expected to be the coldest day of the year so far as freezing Arctic air sweeps across the UK. Temperatures will plummet to lows of -3 in Scotland and -2 in the northwest and east of England. That's today and tomorrow. The Met Office says the conditions are likely to cause some travel disruption as well as power outages. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Morning, still to come. Ahead of Jeremy Hunt's spring budget, Labour's Rachel Reeves is accusing the Tories of squandering the UK's potential. Do you agree? We'll find out in just a while.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is To The Point on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, more WhatsApp leaks from former Health Secretary Matt Hancock's phone were revealed over the weekend as he plotted to oust the NHS England chief Sir Simon Stevens before the 2020 lockdown.
The latest batch of messages reveal that Hancock conspired with Dominic Cummings. Remember him? He was Boris Johnson's key advisor to try to get rid of Simon Stevens, but they don't reveal why the Minister and Number 10 were planning to do so.
So joining us now for more on this is GB News presenter Nigel Farage. Nigel, good to see you. Also glad to see that they didn't manage to put you behind bars, which is one of the WhatsApp messages, for being a pub hooligan. How did you feel when you saw that message?
Well, I've been called many things over the years, but hooligan's brand new, so I've now got it as my new Twitter handle, I'm very pleased to say. Amazing, isn't it? The 14 days, this is the 14-day rule, and the argument was, had I fully quarantined for 14 days? And they say, no, it could have been 13 days and 12 hours. What we've learned this morning is that 14 days wasn't based on science. 14 days, actually, Chris Whitty wanted it down to 5 days or 7 days. So this is Matt Hancock playing politics, doing his utmost to scare the population. I mean, the whole thing's a disgrace.
It really is. I mean, look, you're very tapped into this crowd, Nigel. You will know how people are feeling about all these messages. Are there still MPs who are terrified, who are wondering what is going to come out next? What did they say which is going to get them into trouble?
Yes, of course. And I spoke to a couple over the weekend. I mean, it's been suggested to me that the Telegraph have got enough to keep this going for 3 months if they want to. It seems ironic in one way that one of the most strongly conservative supporting newspapers is putting all this out, but they're going to go on doing it. And we are learning an awful lot, aren't we? You know, we're learning, things we've seen this morning. Oh, this is a win for Hancock. As if the whole thing was just some sort of, university game about who comes out with the best political reputation. I think perhaps the most damaging thing so far is the admission that they deliberately tried to terrify the population into compliance. What does that say about a free society? What does it say about our country? I mean, not even in wartime did we treat people like this. And I have to say the conclusion many will draw is that the Conservative Party is simply not fit for office.
It wasn't just the scaring people, Nigel, was it? And that was the language they used in there, put the fear of God into them. It was the way they weaponised the police to act against people. We won't ever forget the 2 ladies who were sat on a park bench and got a fine. That fine was eventually withdrawn. But they, under strict political instructions, the police were doing the job of Matt Hancock in enforcing these lockdown rules, many of which we now see were a waste of time.
Well, absolutely, Andrew. The police knocked on my door 3 times during 2020. 3 times. A police car arrived here with a couple of officers threatening me that I'd been, somebody had taken a video of me out and about, and what was I really doing? And I just thought, what a colossal waste of time and money. Now, they weren't going to frighten me, but generally, the population were frightened. They were cowed. And when you realise the whole time that they were partying away in Downing Street, I mean, it really is. It really is. I can't think of anything in my life more damning about our political leaders. It's even more damning than the expenses scandal, in my view.
Yeah, and Isabel Oakeshott has come under a huge amount of focus over the weekend. So many comment pieces written about her, so many interviews conducted in which she is considered to be the problem. I sent her a hamper yesterday. I sent her a hamper to say thank you. I think she's probably in need of a drink as well after the week she's had. But, you know, because for me, she's a hero. It's the greatest act of public service I've seen in my lifetime. I can't lie.
That's all well and good, but don't have any private conversations with her, because you may find they will appear in newspapers fairly shortly thereafter. And if you go back and look, the previous time this happened was when she wrote a book for Aaron Banks a handful of years ago, in which Aaron Banks gave her a load of emails, which, by coincidence, all finished up at The Guardian with some pretty tenuous links to the Russian embassy. And, of course, I was in the middle of all of that.
But you must...
Funded by Russia. So all well and good. It is, of course, very important that we learn this information. But the fact, given that track record, going back to the Humes, that she's getting a bit of stick, don't be surprised by that.
No, I'm not surprised by it, but especially from the media, who she exposed as having fallen for the lies for over 2 years. But Nigel, you must be pleased that she's released these, surely, because this goes some way towards doing the job that the COVID inquiry under Baroness Hallett simply will not do.
Oh, no, look, there is no question that these leaks are a matter of public interest. No question about that. There is no question that us knowing all of these things is very important. I doubt any official government COVID inquiry would have given us this depth of knowledge. So, of course, I'm pleased that it's out. And, you know, what we must conclude from this must never be allowed to happen again. But you see, what happened was, when the Coronavirus Act went through Parliament, I think David Davis and 3 others said we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be giving ministers the powers of a medieval king without accountability. And we know through human history, if you give people too much power, guess what? They use it.
I was just going to ask you just finally on that, Nigel. Do you think, God forbid, there is ever another pandemic that affects this country, that if a government of any political persuasion tried to enforce a similar lockdown, that the country would go along with it? Because I think there would be civil resistance.
Well, I'll be honest, Andrew, towards the end of all of that, I was ignoring the rules completely. You know, if laws become enemies of men, men become enemies of laws. And if they try it again, I will ignore them from day one. Yes, you're quite right. Millions of people would just say, up with this, we will not put.
Our government. We've signed the World Health Organization's Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. It won't be up to our government. They will effectively then be de facto leaders of this country, and we will have to do what they say. And that's not a world I want to live in.
I mean, there's a big problem here, isn't there? Because we voted Brexit to get back our independence. You just made that comment about where the WHO wants to go on the same day that James Dyson points out that if Rishi Sunak signs us up to an OECD agreement on corporation tax, we take that ability away from voters and Parliament. So, you know, I think we need to really almost redefine why this country voted Brexit. And by the way, that equally applies to what the government's talking today on immigration and people coming here illegally. I'm not sure any of that actually will come to pass because of ECHR and UN declarations. So maybe we need to debate once again, do we actually want to be self-governing?
All right, Nigel Farage. By the way, Nigel, I would definitely have come and visit you in prison.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right, thanks, Nigel. We've got Liam Halligan in the studio. So I'm just going to come to you, Liam. How are you?
I'm not bad.
Did you have a nice weekend?
Yeah, not too bad.
Good.
Not too bad.
What are you here to talk about?
A few journalistic activities that will be revealed in the days to come that I can't say too much about.
But you want to talk about the budget, but didn't you spend some time with Suella Braverman,
yeah,
the Home Secretary?
In response to Nigel there, or building on what he said, really, I sat down with Suella Braverman. She gave me her first sit-down interview as Home Secretary. And we talked a lot about small boats. And I think her comments on small boats kind of got lost because she talked about lots of other things as well. And would she resign? Wouldn't she resign? She gave a kind of veiled threat. But in that interview with me that was here on GB News, you can still watch it on the GB News YouTube channel, she was absolutely insistent with this new legislation coming through, which she, of course, is presenting to the House of Commons. She's the minister in charge as Secretary of State. She said, what we're trying to do, and she's trying to do something which a Whitehall source later described to me as pushing the legal boundaries of the law as far as it will go. What they're trying to do with this legislation, within the European Convention on Human Rights, not leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, is make it so if people arrive, they can be immediately deported while they are appealing to the European Convention of Human Rights, indeed that court in Strasbourg. That's the legal rift that they're trying to overcome.
There's immediately and immediately. So what, within hours of landing on British soil, they can be out the door?
Well, certainly they'd have to be questioned and processed and then turned around, but they wouldn't be allowed to go to hotels. They wouldn't be allowed to be free, if you like. And this is the thing, because we don't have identity cards in this country, because the benefit system, as a universal benefit system, in many ways is quite lax compared to other countries. People disappear. This is what happens with people who are pending what their asylum status is.
But where will they go then, Liam, when they're having their application process in that short
there will be some kind of
holding centre.
Some kind of holding centre.
Right.
Awful phrase, but I'm sure the vocabulary will be worked on. There'll be some kind of holding centre which is secure.
Right.
Which is secure in the way a hotel isn't, and then they will be removed from the country and placed in a safe third country, be it Rwanda or someone else. But the key point is the British government's trying to pass legislation which it claims other countries have passed who are signatories to the ECHR. Of course, the ECHR, British lawyers and MPs wrote this thing in the aftermath of the Second World War. We were the first country to ratify it in 1951. The optics of leaving it, the legal establishment will go absolutely ballistic. The bien-pensant media class will go nuts.
All the more reason to do so,
Rishi Sunak doesn't want to leave the ECHR.
Because he's part of that class.
They're trying to present legislation which means you can remove people while their asylum claims are looked at, even if they're appealing to the ECHR, the Strasbourg court, with our kind of, legal aid, cottage industry helping them. But Suella Braverman was absolutely insistent in this interview. Leaving the ECHR remains on the table. Leaving the ECHR remains on the table. She said it 2 or 3 times. And there was a kind of parallel in her mind between keeping the option to leave the ECHR on the table in order to get this bill through the Commons and indeed the Lords, which will massively resist it. And at the time, this is a couple of weeks ago, for the government to put through the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill through the Lords, which allows them, if they want, to unilaterally leave this new arrangement they've made with the European Commission and the broader EU. And Rishi Sunak did not go for keeping the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill there as a kind of stopgap, as a kind of threat. He didn't do that. So is he still going to leave ECHR on the table? That is the really important political part of where we are now.
This piece you wrote in the paper over the weekend, Liam, you, as usual, have stuck your neck out. You can't just go with the crowd, can you? You can't just go along with the crowd. You're the one every time. We're not going to have a recession.
Well,
Wonderful news.
If it makes me... I don't want to be wrong, I'd rather be unpopular...
I love the fact that you're maverick.
I'd rather be unpopular than wrong. So what I did in my Sunday Telegraph column this weekend is I renewed my call, which I first made months ago. A lot of people are jumping on this bandwagon for the government not to raise corporation tax from 19 to 25%. It's a misguided policy. Even the likes of the National Institute for Economic and Social Research, the most august, oldest British economic think tank. It's basically, sort of annex of the Treasury. The staff won't like me for saying that, but it's very, very closely connected to Whitehall. Even the National Institute, which do not frighten the horses, they're saying if we raise corporation tax, it will materially affect investment. I've been saying for some months that if we raise corporation tax, rather than helping to fix the public finances by raising money, Bev, it will actually cost us money because of the impact on investment incentives and growth. Look at AstraZeneca.
They've gone to Ireland.
They've gone to Ireland.
And if you cancelled that in the budget, who's not to say they haven't signed on the dotted line, we're bringing the factory back to Britain?
Absolutely. And it's not a tax cut. It's keeping the tax where it is. It will feel like a tax cut.
And remember Jeremy Hunt in his Tory leadership campaign last summer when he got 20 votes, pathetic, said he would cut the corporation tax by 5%. He's now going to put it up by 6%.
He said he'd cut it from 19 to 15.
4%.
Before that, he said he wanted to cut it to 12.5%.
He did.
In order to match the Irish. But that was just part of the column, because it was a fun-packed column, Bev, as you know.
Always is.
Most of the column was actually saying, look, we're too gloomy. There are some survey data out, not GDP numbers, official numbers. There's survey data out from what's called the PMI index, the Purchasing Managers Index. These are very detailed, authoritative surveys of company bosses, not just big corporate bosses, people running plumbing shops and retailers. And the PMI numbers are now showing a significant uptick in business confidence because business feels inflation's coming down, interest rates may have peaked, maybe the Tories might have a brainwave and not raise corporation tax anymore. This will be the first rise in corporation tax, by the way, for 50 years. Yeah, for 51 years. Wow. Unbelievable. So I actually think, and I have stuck my neck out, I think we're being too gloomy. I think the Bank of England is being too gloomy. Of course, the cost of living crisis goes on. A lot of companies are suffering, not least with energy bills. Mortgages. But there are some green shoots. Let's not trample on them.
Good. Thank you, Liam. Right. Still to come, we're going to be looking into more of the day's biggest stories. We've got the papers, a section with Kevin Maguire and Amanda Platel. We'll see you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Danny Johnson.
Welcome back. Now, we're pleased to be joined by associate editor at the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, and Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel. What do you want to talk about first, Andrew Pearce?
I think we should talk about the appalling idea of Boris Johnson knighting his father, having already put his brother in the House of Lords.
It's just unbelievable. I literally could not believe it. I thought, who else is he going to put in there? More knighthoods than anybody else before him. And then I was just thinking, who else? Kevin's got some ideas about that. And then I just thought, well, thank God he's not knighting all of his mistresses.
Oh, there'd be no room.
Otherwise, it would be a 200 list.
It's just shameless.
It is utterly shameless. I wonder if his sister Rachel's going to get
in for damehood, I don't know.
I know she'd have to turn it down, I'm sure. But no,
it's like how she would turn it down.
It is sickening, though, because there is no reason you can come up with to give a knighthood to Stanley Johnson other than he was the Prime Minister's father. And then you've got to go with the fact that he is accused of breaking his wife's nose in a domestic abuse case. He's accused of sexually assaulting, which he denies, Caroline Noakes, a Conservative MP, when she was a young woman looking to be a candidate, slapping her bottom. He's a bit...
He put his brother in the House of Lords, who hadn't had a stellar, distinguished cabinet career. I don't think Joe Johnson even got into the cabinet.
And then he basically... And then he quit politics, didn't he?
Yeah.
So, and what possible reason can there be for Stanley Johnson? What was he, an MEP or something?
Yeah,
an MP?
About 5,000 years ago.
I know.
And also, wasn't he, during lockdowns as well, going out to his Greek villa?
Yes,
he
was. Via Bulgaria. He was finding ways of breaking all the rules. Yeah. Some people might say that was rather ingenious, but when you're son is the Prime Minister, you should be following the
but it rather run in the family, Kevin.
Oh, it does run in the family.
Getting round the rules. He said he was out there to make sure the rental property was up to standard.
But resignation honours lists are different to normal because the Prime Minister who's quit is indulged a little.
Yeah.
This is going to be too much.
And he seems to have 100 names, lots of peerages too. Cameron and May had about 60. I don't think Blair and Brown had resignation on his list. I don't think they did it.
Get the 29-year-old who's getting a peerage.
Well, how do you think, where do you think Boris Johnson is now in terms of his political career?
Heading down fast.
I still think that there's a chance that he'll come back, but I think that his lot. Look, it's not my choice. I think that his lot are thinking, let Rishi sink, let the party get completely destroyed, wait until it's rebuilt itself slightly, then come in halfway through Labour's term.
There's a Freddie Krueger side to it,
millions
isn't
in
there?
the meantime.
It's just like the Freddie Krueger movies where you think, right, he's gone, the horror's over, and then he's back, Johnson, he's utterly shameless.
You see, it's very, in that case, it's incredibly myopic. If you are a resigning Prime Minister, and you're not going to go back into politics, or you're always going to be there on the periphery, but you don't actually want the big job again, then you can take these shameless acts. If he becomes Prime Minister again, or at least the leader of the Conservative
he thinks different
Party,
rules apply to him, and he always has. That's the trouble.
He absolutely believes he'll be back as Prime Minister.
Yeah, he does think that. I don't think he will be.
But it served him well, always lying, being brazen, breaking the rules. He
I
got
don't know if
to
he'll
number 10 on the
he
back
might
of
not
it.
even hold his seat at the general election, because he's facing the privileges investigation in the first place, chaired by Harriet Harman, who's not a very impartial chairman, because she's already said on the record, hang on, Kevin, she said on the record he's a liar and he's misled the Parliament, and she's chairing the inquiry.
Tory-dominated
She's chairing the
committee.
inquiry. It's a scandal.
Tory-dominated
Let me ask you then, as we move on actually to the Matt Hancock thing, how do you think Boris Johnson has come out of the WhatsApp leaked messages, Amanda? Because, in fact, he seems to be the one that occasionally was asking the sensible questions.
He didn't want to lock down.
This is what we'd been told all along, that Boris was anti-lockdown. He's a libertarian.
Yeah.
You know, he does not believe in the state interfering in people's lives. And he was against so many of these things. And then we turn out Matt Hancock was the dirty rat. Actually, Kevin's got a really funny thing in his column
But you
today.
see, Boris Johnson doesn't come off lightly for me in that, because if you genuinely believe this, you push it. You were the Prime Minister. You had the choice.
Yeah,
you
but come on, he was
the
obviously...
spine.
He was... I don't think it's about spine. I think that they all had such conflicting information. Don't forget he got really ill, and he was ill before that. He was ill with COVID before he was hospitalised. I don't think his judgment was 100%. Can't we read out
His
Kevin's joke?
judgment was better.
Kevin's joke
than anybody else.
Let's hear
Kevin's
Kevin's
joke.
joke. Come on.
Okay, Kevin Maguire today, he says,
Is it
going
funny
down.
for a change?
It's really funny.
That's a change.
And
How unusual.
I'm trying to do my good voice. So it's a picture of Matt Hancock from I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here with the toad on his head. And it says, the toad filmed on Matt Hancock's head should seek a super injunction when WhatsApp messages mean a link to him is toxic.
No one wants to be linked to Hancock.
That was a really good joke.
Yeah,
not bad.
But of course, yeah. Well, I mean, you could laugh a little bit. I mean, a little bit, even if it's a false laugh, one of those fairground 10p in and
I actually thought it was a bit leaden, the joke, actually. Sorry. I did.
Isn't he rude?
No,
I'm
giving my
Just to
opinion.
ignore him saying that.
It's my opinion.
Best reading
Did you think it was very funny,
on
Bev?
a Monday.
It was okay.
Yeah, okay.
But I feel this isn't really a laughing matter, to be frank. Like, people like me spent 2 years being absolutely vilified, ostracised, criticised in the press, called crazy anti-vaxxers and crazy anti... It turns out, guess what? We were right all along.
What way were you right all along?
We were right all along in that the policy decisions were not based on scientific fact that they had access to that we did not.
But do you accept the need for some lockdowns?
The first one, absolutely. I was as scared as everybody else in the first one. I was washing my hands out the back of the car with mineral water. I mean, all insanity when you look back now. Second one, no. So my question with these is, how come I knew stuff that they didn't know? How come there were some of us who knew they were lying to us?
No. Well, you could see all the way through. They would say they followed the scientific guidance, and other times they would say they were guided by it. There was always that contradiction. It was exposed quite quickly, shortages in PPE, quite exposed very quickly what was happening in care homes and the culling of people.
No, he put a protective arm around them.
Yeah, protective ring.
Do you remember? Protective ring.
Which he comes out the worst in his own WhatsApp messages, but we don't know what the Telegraph haven't yet run, what they have, because they've got their own agenda.
In what they've run,
and it's an anti-lockdown agenda.
But they haven't been anti-lockdown.
They have for some while now, the Telegraph. Sorry about that.
And throughout the Hancock revelations, he had his own personal political agenda. That's what's become clear.
Yeah.
He would block anything that made his former decisions look bad. And that's what's so cynical and awful about it.
And he actually says, I need to get the credit.
Yeah.
It's got the vaccine round. It's got to be about me, as opposed to making people...
Well, if you find it safe to isolate for only a week rather than 2 weeks, you should say hurrah.
Yeah.
We've now discovered... Yeah, we've discovered, we've looked at the virus, how it moves now, how it transmits, you only have to isolate half as long. That's good news, because he didn't want to do that because he thought people would say, well, why were you isolating 2 weeks before? Quite right, people can resent that, but nevertheless, you've got to see it as good news. You're moving on.
It should have been a triumph. We're going down from 14 days you've got to isolate to 5 days. But he thought, oh no, that means people think we were wrong in the first place. So it's all about what people thought of him.
But it was also about the fact that he was absolutely high, positively aroused by the amount of power that this little man, this thin-skinned egomaniac, suddenly had power beyond his wildest dreams. And that message from January 2020, when one of his aides says to him, effectively says, I am paraphrasing, I don't have it in front of me, a pandemic would be great for your career, when he said this could move you to the next level of politics. Now, don't tell me that man did not have that in his mind when he was making
it moved him into a jungle.
With
a toad on his head.
His ambition's always been greater than his ability. And he's always been utterly shameless. And it's always been about him, always about number one. And he's been found out now, and that's why I think you can say the leaking might have been underhand, might be a stab in the back, but it's in the public interest, quite clear.
Oh, I think it's wonderful. Are you a fan of the fact that Isabella has done this? Are you in support of the fact that we've got these visuals?
Yeah.
Are you, Amanda?
Yeah.
She did the right thing.
She had to do the right thing, But Nigel Farage does make a very good point. Nobody's going to trust her as far as they can spit.
Well, they shouldn't have trusted her in the first place because she's got form. But I think that most people who cared about what happened during COVID, which is almost all the country, think that what she's done is actually in the public's interest.
What was Matt Hancock doing, giving all these personal messages to an anti-lockdown
Well, like you say, Boris Johnson has been untouchable. Right, that's the end of our first hour. The next few moments, we're going to be looking into Rishi Sunak's plan to crack down on channel migrants in just a little while. Don't go anywhere.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. It's going to be a wintry week. Snow showers across northern Scotland already. We are going to see further snow across other parts of the country during the coming days. The air is coming down from the Arctic. This area of low pressure has introduced some moisture, and therefore that combination of wet and cold means snow showers are packing in across northern Scotland. This weather front itself is mostly rain at this stage, but some rain is likely over northern England, spreading into the Midlands, Wales and pushing into parts of southern England this afternoon. Further north, though, snow showers continue to come into northern Scotland. As you can imagine, we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place. It's going to be a cold day across the north. Temperatures only 3 or 4 Celsius. Add on that wind and it feels much colder. Further south, we might get up to 9 for a time, but it's going to feel colder as these rain showers trickle southwards. And then we could start overnight to see a little bit more in the way of sleet and snow across the Midlands, parts of Wales and southern England. Further snow showers for Northern Ireland, northeast England and northern and eastern Scotland. So again, snow and ice warning in place here. Further south, I'd say it's more going to be a mixture of rain and snow, but you could wake up to a covering over parts of the Midlands, South Wales and southeast England. These snow showers making things slippery first thing in the morning. Plenty of sunshine on Tuesday across southwest Scotland, northwest England. In the south, though, quite a grey day with continued mixture of rain, sleet and some snow. The snow showers also continuing across northern Scotland, perhaps easing, though, for Northern Ireland and northeast England. Another cold one, though, wherever you are. A colder day across the south tomorrow compared to today. And as more wet weather comes into the southwest, there is then the threat here of some snow as we go through Tuesday night and into Wednesday that could scoot across other southern counties during Wednesday. So, as I said, a wintry week. It stays cold throughout. Snow possible in the south on Wednesday. That snow risk moving north later in the week. Goodbye.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GBNews, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It is 11 o'clock on Monday, the 6th of March. This is To The Point with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Illegal migrants banned from the UK for life. That's Rishi Sunak's tough new strategy to stop those small boats crossing the channel. But is it really enough to deter those who want to enter illegally? In just a moment, we're going to be talking to Jacob Rees-Mogg of this parish, of course, to get his reaction.
scared of being proved wrong. Now disgraced Health Secretary Matt Hancock is accused of ignoring advice to cut COVID quarantine because he was worried about his own reputation, despite medical advice to reduce isolation. This morning, more leaked messages appear to show the government used fear and guilt to control the public.
And King Charles, he's invited Meghan and Harry to the coronation, but guess what? They're not telling us yet whether they intend to go. They've been evicted, of course, from the house on the Windsor estate. Harry's also taken part in yet another snooze fest interview, not booze fest. So is there any place for the Duke and Duchess of Netflix along the working royals?
That and... That and loads more to come this morning. But first of all, your news with Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thanks very much and good morning from the GB newsroom. It's 11:05. Thousands of asylum seekers will be left permanently in limbo under new proposed government plans to tackle small boats crossing the Channel. The new legislation would mean those who arrive on boats will be prevented from claiming asylum and will be banned from returning to the UK. The Refugee Council has warned the plans could shatter the UK's commitments under the UN Refugee Convention to give people a fair hearing regardless of their route to the country. The government says it's getting a grip on illegal migration and promised more safe routes for asylum seekers. Immigration lawyer Skylar McKeith says there will be challenges with the new legislation.
Individuals must not be left in limbo while waiting for third countries to agree to admit them. So we could potentially see issues here with UK arrivees being left in limbo, waiting for safe third countries to admit them. It's a positive step forward on the Prime Minister's part. He's committed to clearing the initial asylum decision backlog, but it's potentially going to be very problematic because it may very well be incompatible with international laws.
Police in Wales searching for 5 people who went missing after a night out say they found 3 bodies. Gwent police say 2 people have been taken to hospital with serious injuries. They were last seen in Cardiff in the early hours of Saturday night before being reported missing. Police also say the vehicle they were travelling in was involved in a collision. Head of news at Wales Online, Kieran Jones, says it was out of character for the group to go off-grid.
We were last seen in the Llanedin area of the city in the early hours of Saturday morning. Then from about 2 a.m. on Saturday, there's just no further contacts, no social media activity, no correspondence with family, friends, loved ones. And obviously over the weekend, those family and friends and loved ones have been understandably very, very concerned. It's entirely out of character, they say, for these 5 people to kind of go entirely off-grid, if you like.
The strikes bill is likely breach to the EU Convention of Human Rights, according to some MPs and peers. The proposals aim to ensure minimum working standards during industrial action across 6 sectors, including health and transport. But a report by the Cross-Party Joint Committee on Human Rights has called on the government to reconsider the legislation. The warning comes as the Unite union has called off the latest upcoming ambulance strikes in England in order to hold pay talks with the government. The industrial action had been due to take place today and Wednesday. Former Met police officer Wayne Couzens will be sentenced shortly for indecent exposure. The 50-year-old is already serving a whole life sentence for the murder of marketing executive Sarah Everard in 2021. He'll be sentenced today for 3 incidents of flashing before he killed Miss Everard. He's pleaded guilty to all counts. Boris Johnson has reportedly put his father forward for a knighthood as part of his resignation honours list. The Times newspaper reports Stanley Johnson has been nominated for the honour. The appointment raises questions after the former Prime Minister's nominated his brother Joe Johnson for a peerage in 2020. But the Science Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, called the claim speculation and said there were bigger fish to fry. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have received an official invitation to King Charles's coronation. It's understood they've been in email correspondence with the King's office over whether they will attend or not. Following the release of Prince Harry's controversial memoir Spare, it's been unclear whether or not the couple would be invited to the ceremony. The coronation will take place at Westminster Abbey on the 6th of May. Novak Djokovic has been forced to withdraw from the Indian Wells tennis tournament in California after failing to get special permission to enter the US due to his vaccination status. International visitors are required to have received 2 jabs against coronavirus, but the world's number 1 is unvaccinated. The country's restrictions are due to end next month, and the tennis star had been hoping for a special exemption as the tournament starts on Wednesday. Arctic air is expected to bring snow, cold winds and icy conditions to parts of the UK this coming week. Temperatures will plummet to lows of -3 in Scotland and -2 in the northwest and east of England. That's today and tomorrow. The yellow warnings in place are also for snow and ice. The Met Office says conditions are likely to cause some travel disruption as well as power outages. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now it's back to Bev and Andrew.
Thank you, Tamsin. Now, still to come in this hour, we'll be speaking to Jacob Rees-Mogg, who'll be talking to us in the studio about Sue Gray's proposed move to join Labour.
But first, more WhatsApp leaks from former Health Secretary Matt Hancock's phone have been revealed. Apparently, he plotted to oust the boss of NHS England, Sir Simon Case, before the 2020 lockdown.
So the latest batch of text messages reveal that Hancock conspired with Dominic Cummings to remove Stevens, but do not reveal why the Minister and Number 10 advisor were planning this move. So joining us now from Westminster is GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Good morning, Darren. More controversy for Matt Hancock to deal with over the weekend. What's the fallout of these latest messages being down at Westminster?
Yeah, maybe not a surprise when you give 100,000 WhatsApp messages to a journalist that they will find a succession of stories day after day after day. It does feel a little bit like the MP's expenses scandal, 15 years ago, when the Daily Telegraph leaked information out or reported on it in a quick succession. And yet here we are again today, as you say, with a series of WhatsApp messages from Matt Hancock. They don't necessarily present him in the best light, aside from what you've just been talking about, suggestions that he decided to keep the kind of quarantine period, if you like, if you tested positive for coronavirus, up to 14 days, even when the scientists were suggesting, some of the chief scientists, that actually it could be lowered to a much shorter time period. Now, why would the Health Secretary do that? Because he feared, he said, that it would give the wrong impression, that it would give the impression that they simply might have got things wrong in the past. He said that it sounded like a massive loosening up. This was reducing the quarantine time, and that it could make it look like ministers had made a mistake. Also, he tried to claim that he was in charge of the vaccines, if you like, that it was all his kind of grand plan, saying that in one of these messages that everyone knows I'm Mr. Vaccine and this is the route out. So, you know, it is an insider kind of example of how politics works. We know it often works by WhatsApp these days. It's still quite extraordinary to have the curtain pulled back, if you like, and see the Prime Minister texting ministers and other officials in the government and some of the replies that came through. Matt Hancock, though, we've not really heard much from him in reaction to all of this. Clearly, he's pretty angry with Isabel Oakeshott for leaking all of it, though she suggested there is more and more brutal things potentially to come. But in the end, though, what I would say is it hasn't really changed, I think. I don't know whether you guys agree with me on this, kind of some of the fundamentals. We haven't really learned anything shockingly new. Yes, there's been a bit of colour here and there, and we've got a little insight into some of the decisions made, but actually some of the big controversies at the time, actually really, we kind of knew they were happening, whether that was arguments about help out to eat out, whether that was arguments or the failures around care homes, etc.
All right, thank you, Darren. Darren McCaffrey there.
Interesting as well, Bev, because when the public inquiry does start, all those Matt Hancock WhatsApps will all have to be part of that inquiry, and I think it's going to really force the people who are managing that inquiry to be much, perhaps, more open than they might otherwise have been.
Would you think they will? Will she have to accept them into the inquiry?
Yeah, I think she'll have to. Because, look, 100,000? Up to 120,000? We've read about them. We want to make... She can put them in a political context, which Matt Hancock would argue have not been put in a proper context.
Well, I would say that if she's having Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages, she also needs to see Boris Johnson.
I think she should.
Needs to see Chris Whitty. She needs to see
she
Patrick Vallance. She needs to see Jonathan Van Tam. A lot of them.
And
you've got nothing to hide. You've got nothing to fear, fellas. You know where she is.
And you know why, Bev? That's why it will take years, and years. And remember, the Iraq War inquiry finally reported, I think, in 2013, 10 years after the war in Iraq. And Bloody Sunday, 40 years later.
Ridiculous. And how many millions of pounds worth of taxpayers' money to get that report? It just needs to, do you know what, I think her terms of references now need to be completely rewritten. Now that we have this information, this raises other questions which she has to answer, because so far the terms of references are very narrow, and it's very much we should have locked down harder, we should have locked down sooner, we should have made more restrictions, more vaccine mandates, because presumably they were operating from a position of informed scientific analysis. We now know that's not true.
Yeah, well,
so,
Lady Hallett,
change your questions.
She's no fool, that's for
Good.
sure. Now, coming up, the government is, of course, you've been hearing about this, announcing a plan to crack down on illegal migration across the Channel. The government is saying they will remove people when they arrive on British soil, and they will receive a lifetime ban if they've arrived illegally.
That's right. Rishi Sunak hopes it will send a strong message and deter migrants from crossing the Channel illegally.
Well, joining us now is the former Chief Immigration Officer of the UK Border Force, Kevin Saunders. Kevin, if I can use your first name, is there anything really substantially new in what you've read so far that the Prime Minister is planning to introduce to the Commons tomorrow?
Well, yes. The idea that that we're going to detain everybody that arrives illegally for 20 days and then remove them is incredible. That's a new one. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I shall wait with bated breath.
Well, that was the next question. If that's what they're planning to do, how will they do it when they've been woefully inadequate at processing every application so far? What is it? The backlog, 160,000 people.
Well, the people that we're talking about now will not be able to claim asylum. If they've arrived illegally, they won't be allowed to claim asylum. So that's that. So it's then just a question of removing them. But I don't know how we're going to remove them, because at the moment, to remove somebody, you have to have a country that's willing to take them, and they have to have a travel document, a passport, or something like that. And of course, these people have got documents. They're all at the bottom of the Channel because they're told to throw them away, so that we don't know their proper names, their dates of birth, and where they come from.
Kevin, our immigration and human rights lawyer that was in the studio in the first hour, he was saying that there's no chance this is going to get through, and that really we still need to be funding the security services in France to stop the human traffickers. He is baffled as to why we can't do that. You've worked down there, you've worked in that area. Why aren't they doing that, Kevin?
Well, they're trying very, very hard to do that. National Crime Agency and the French authorities are working hard to stop the human trafficking. It is very, very difficult because the traffickers always seem to be one step ahead of the authorities in France. And of course, when the boats are being launched from the beaches, it's reported that the charities are acting as spotters, so that if the forces of law and order are seen, then the charities are warning the boat people.
Kevin, I can't understand. You tell us it's very difficult to get these people smuggling gangs. Why is it difficult? We've got Interpol, we've got the French police, British police. There's a lot of interest in finding them, arresting them and banging them up. So why are they so difficult to pin down?
Well, we believe that they are based in Turkey. A lot of them are based in Turkey. And in fact, apparently, there is one street in Turkey that you can, in Ankara, that you can actually walk down. It's a bit like a travel agent's in the UK.
Wow.
You go into whichever shop you like and book your crossing. And that's the big problem, being able to shut these down. And I know that an undercover journalist went in there and it was incredibly difficult. And that's what we're up against. It is difficult, and also infiltrating the gangs. That's the way to do it. But of course, that's easier said than done.
It just seems crazy. Kevin, thank you so much. Kevin Saunders there, former Border Force Control Officer. It just seems crazy. If you can go to the street, this has got to be just about manpower and will. And put the numbers on the beach.
I can remember interviewing an immigration minister when I was on the Daily Telegraph, and he told me, it was Damien Green, and he told me about this street in an Indian city where you could get your dodgy passports, your dodgy visas. And I said, well, why, you've got a relationship with the Indian police, why don't you get it all closed down? Well, it's not as straightforward as that. But if they know where they are, it is straightforward.
Those charities, absolutely, those charities that are on the beach spotting for the security forces, they are then complicit in anybody that drowns during that crossing. Children, teenagers, adults.
And then they'll blame heartless people like me and you who don't think they should be crossing the channel in the first place.
Yeah, well, I don't think they should be crossing the channel in the first place, but, you know, it's clearly a mess and nobody seems to be able to solve it. What do you think? GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Still to come, we're going to be joined by the former Brexit Minister, Jacob Rees-Mogg, who is, of course, now of this parish. He's going to talk through Labour's appointment, outrageous appointment, in my view, for what it's worth, of Sue Gray, the civil servant who did the Boris Johnson Partygate inquiry as Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, no less.
See you in a minute. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. Welcome back to The Point with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. New pairing from this morning. Hope you're enjoying the show.
We are?
No.
Oh.
You weren't my
Well, I
plan
am.
A.
Well, I am.
can't lie.
I am.
We'll get there. It's like an arranged marriage, this.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jacob Rees-Mogg is here.
Who we love. Jacob Rees-Mogg of this parish. Jacob, The immigration, is this finally going to work?
It really depends on the view that we take of the European Convention on Human Rights. That if we pass a law, Parliament is supreme, and that will be the law, and it will be implied by our judges, particularly in the post-Baroness Hale era, when the judges have got back to interpreting the law rather than inventing the law, which is preferable. If, however, we still allow the supremacy of the European Convention, then there will be a succession of legal cases, and nothing much will happen until it's decided in Strasbourg.
Well, Suella Braverman, in that interview in the Sunday Telegraph yesterday, I'm sure you read it with Liam Halligan, said nothing is off the table about the European Convention. Would Rishi Sunak risk the opprobrium of all the human rights left-wing lawyers and take us out of it, bearing in mind the only other countries who have pulled out are countries like Russia?
I don't think there's a majority to do that in Parliament. So even if he were willing, I doubt he would get it through even in the Commons, let alone the Lords. What I think there is a majority for is behaving the way we did over prisoner voting rights. You may remember the European Court said that we had to allow prisoner voting rights. And we just refused, and we had votes in Parliament. And then after an extended period, we came to a compromise where, if you're on remand, you're allowed to vote. That says some prisoners of a very small number now do get votes which satisfied the court. And I think we should look at it that way. I think the full-on explosive withdrawal is not a political reality.
Well, that still won't stop them challenging the lawyers under the Act, will it?
But if our law is clear, then our courts won't intervene pending anything going on in the European Human Rights Court. And we have to be clear that these injunctions given by the European Court are not valid, which is what stopped the first Rwanda flights. Why are they not valid? Other countries don't recognise them. And it was the European Court decided to give itself this power. It was never given it by a treaty arrangement.
OK, we've got limited time with you. You're on the telly tonight on GB News at 8 o'clock. You enjoying that?
I love it.
You're really good. I was surprised. I can't lie. I thought you might be quite rubbish, but you're actually very, very good.
I'm glad I came on this morning. But
you're also much taller in real life.
Yeah,
you're enormous. I had no idea.
Television shrinks people, like Mike TV in
Clearly.
in the Chocolate Factory, who I seem to remember was literally shrunk and became a very small Mike TV.
Well, I think you're a wonderful addition to the channel, Jacob. You haven't escaped these WhatsApp revelations. You and your family also got dragged into them. How did you feel when... It's a horrible sensation when you know that private correspondence has been given not only to somebody that you didn't send it to in the first place, but the nation.
Well, no, I think if you're in public life, you must expect that things about you come out into the public arena. You end up leading a public life in all ways. You can't say, oh, that's private and so on. I think public figures mustn't be too squeamish about what's written about them. I'm very against the creeping privacy laws that we've got, actually another thing from the human rights courts, because I believe in freedom of speech. And if I've done something or I've said something, people should be entitled to report it. And bear in mind, politicians spend most of their time, particularly if you look at the WhatsApp things, Matt Hancock, trying to get a good impression of themselves. It's only fair that when there's something critical, that's printed.
But what's come out, we always knew there's a preoccupation with MPs in terms of their appearance and how they come across to the public. But the volume was turned up on that particular ambition during that period of time. Is that something which is exclusive to Matt Hancock more than the other politicians?
I think Matt takes it to an extreme level. My view in government is that if you do the right thing, if you do a good job, you will get good PR from it. And that is much more important than painting yourself orange, as some politicians do, to try and appear good.
When we read these WhatsApps, Jacob, it reminds us all of how many extraordinary powers a small group of men decided to take for themselves. It was called the Quad. I just remind myself it was Michael Gove, the Prime Minister Boris, Rishi Sunak and Matt Hancock. Parliament often had very little scrutiny. Should that be allowed again?
Well, not only Parliament, but the Cabinet.
Quite.
I was in the Cabinet at the time, and I didn't know that Chris Whitty was saying that we could perfectly safely reduce the quarantining period to 3 days.
No.
Otherwise, I would have been saying, well, why aren't we doing this?
But how did you not know? I knew that. Like, the information was there for anybody that wanted to find it.
That wasn't what was being briefed to the Cabinet. We were getting that the decision had been made, that it was going to remain, or then it was finally reduced under great pressure. But the enthusiasm for locking people up was something that was not shared with the rest of the cabinet or the evidence.
So what happened then if you fought back against that during that period of time? If you really tried to make your voice heard to say, this is wrong, what we're doing here, we're going to be paying the price for this, we need a full cost-benefit analysis. Who is looking at the cost of locking down the NHS and making it a COVID-only service?
It was decided by the Quad, and I think the then Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, was making the case for easing lockdowns. When I spoke to Boris during this period, I was inevitably making the case for easing lockdowns, but I wasn't in the Quad. There were cabinet discussions, but by the time we got to those discussions, most of the decisions had already been made. We had a pre-cabinet briefing for those of us who weren't in the Quad, basically to tell us what had been decided.
The result was, apart from all the issues with mental health and civil liberty, a calamitous impact, Jacob, on the economy.
I agree. I mean, we must never do this again. When it first started, I was not in favour of emergency legislation. I was in favour of using the Civil Contingencies Act, which has much greater parliamentary scrutiny and happens on a UK-wide basis rather than the devolved authorities. The devolved stuff was ridiculous. You couldn't, if you lived on the Welsh border, you were at risk of going into Wales and being arrested, and caused great confusion, and even travel arrangements were separate through the devolved authorities. It should have been done on a UK-wide basis under the Civil Contingencies Act, and then it would have required very regular parliamentary votes, whereas we had 6 monthly votes to decide whether to extend it or not.
It was myopic beyond belief. That's what stuns me to this day. Why?
It was, but there was a very strong feeling against it. I was Leader of the House of Commons at the time, and along with Mr Speaker, we were very determined to keep Parliament open. Lots of people on all parties were saying, why are you making us take this risk? Why are you expecting people to come in and vote physically? There was huge opposition to it, and I was saying, look, democracy is worth taking a risk for. I pointed out that after Black Death, Parliament had been delayed, that we could do better than they'd done in whatever it is, 1348, 49.
A lot more of this in your programme tonight.
Oh, well, yes, I expect there'll be lots more on this.
Good, thanks. Nice to meet you, Jake. Right, still to come. Harry and Meghan have been invited to the King's coronation in May, but will they attend? We'll find out after your morning's news with Tamsin.
Bev, thank you. It's 11:31. Here are the headlines from the GB newsroom. Thousands of asylum seekers will be left permanently in limbo under new proposed government plans to tackle small boats crossing the Channel. The Refugee Council has warned the plans could shatter the UK's commitments under the UN Refugee Convention to give people a fair hearing regardless of their route to the country. The new legislation would mean those who arrive on boats would be prevented from claiming asylum and would be banned from returning to the UK. The government says it's getting a grip on illegal migration and promised more safe routes for asylum seekers. An investigation is underway after a fatal car crash in Wales that left 3 people dead and 2 seriously injured. Police in Wales say the group went missing after a night out on Saturday. Peers and MPs are warning the Prime Minister's strike bill is likely in breach of the European Convention on Human Rights. The proposals aim to ensure minimum working standards during industrial action across 6 sectors, including health and transport. But a report by the Cross-Party Joint Committee on Human Rights has called on the government to reconsider the legislation. Arctic air is expected to bring snow, cold winds and icy conditions to parts of the UK this week. Temperatures will plummet to lows of -3 in Scotland and -2 in the northwest and east of England today and tomorrow. The Met Office says conditions are likely to cause some travel disruption as well as power outages. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now back to Bev and Andrew.
OK, so when we return, we're going to dive into more of your day's top stories from the newspapers. How are you doing?
All right.
Good. We're going to be reading them in the break. See you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Point with Beth Turner and Andrew Pearce. So the Sussexes have been invited to King Charles' coronation ceremony in May, but they are refusing to confirm whether they're going to be attending.
They just love the drama, don't they? A statement from Harry and Meghan confirms they've been emailed about the coronation and an official letter of invitation will be sent later.
So Cameron Walker is here to tell us more. So they've got an email. Save the date, I presume, because that's not very royal, is it? You get email. I've been looking for a big embossed envelope with possibly a wax seal. Lipstick kiss from Camilla, the works. They've not got any of that yet.
They don't, but nobody has any of that yet. From my understanding, save the dates are starting to trickle out from Buckingham Palace through emails and I'm sure other ways as well. But then the big official invitations, which you were talking about, I'm not quite sure they'll be kissed by the Queen Consort, but anyway, they'll
Indulge me, Cameron.
Yeah. They'll be going out a few weeks before the event itself, so actually relatively short notice. But the fact that Harry and Meghan's team have decided to confirm that they are in email correspondence clearly suggests that they are very much invited. But the fact they also made it very clear that Harry and Meghan have not decided if they are going to attend, I think speaks volumes, because this, of course, comes off the back of another statement I received from the Sussexes saying that they have been asked to leave Frogmore Cottage. The Mail this morning is reporting that perhaps Frogmore Cottage is being used as some kind of bargaining chip as to whether they will or will not attend the coronation.
Well,
the King
it's
reportedly
safe for them, isn't it? That's a security issue.
Yeah, and that is the big thing here. From Harry and Meghan's perspective, the security of Frogmore Cottage is within the guarded perimeter of the Windsor estate with police, armed guards, etc. When they stood back as working members of the royal family, they lost their own personal police protection because they are not...
There was some speculation coming at the weekend that they might get an apartment in Buckingham Palace. They'd be the only royals there because they've all moved out because it's a building site, as you know.
Yes, it's understood Prince Andrew was moved out of that apartment in question because of the building work. Buckingham Palace is undergoing a 10-year refurbishment programme, and reportedly Harry and Meghan have been offered that to move into at the time of the coronation, which clearly would give them some security.
Do you think they've turned off the water and the heating? They've got Harris fencing around the outside and a few tarpaulins down for them.
What's the best thing, Cameron? Harry goes because it's his father. and Meghan stays behind in America. It's Archie's 4th birthday.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah, we have to remember that it is Archie's 4th birthday. I cannot imagine the Duchess of Sussex would want to leave Archie on his birthday, but clearly it's a big historical occasion. The first time we've had a coronation in 70 years. We know that the King still very much loves his son, Prince Harry, but clearly there is a lot of public interest on whether will he or won't he attend. And the fear from Buckingham Palace and perhaps the King is that Harry's going to be a big distraction. However, Harry and Meghan did attend the Queen's funeral. They did attend the Jubilee celebrations. I think perhaps they were a bit of a distraction, but they didn't completely overshadow the entire thing.
They were sat behind the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, who, if they walked in here, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, nobody would recognise them.
No, Cameron
because working royals, they were behind anybody who's a working royal, they were even behind Prince Andrew.
Yes.
Well, as the royal reporter then, Cameron, answer that question. If they are here, is that going to be the first thing you guys are looking at?
What,
Meghan
where
and
they're
Harry.
sat?
Well, are you going to be focused on them? How much would the media focus on them? You are the media.
So lots of people always ask me that. Why do we focus so much on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex and Prince Harry in particular? The fact remains, he's 5th in line to the throne. Like it or loathe it, he is still a Councillor of State by law, so he could be asked to deputise on behalf of the King if necessary. And he is the son, the second son of the King, who is the guy being crowned in Westminster Abbey. So, unfortunately, there is a bit of a public interest in this. Whether or not it trumps the public interest of the King being crowned himself, clearly that is not the case.
It's also, Cameron, though, isn't it? Nobody who saw the image of Prince Harry walking behind his mother's coffin can ever forget an 11-year-old boy, vulnerable, heartbroken, but bravely, step by step. It must have been an incredible experience, and I think the whole nation took him under their wing, and many people now, looking back, are just very disappointed about the way he's behaving, including me.
Disappointed, perhaps. I think a lot of people are very sad as well. I think we got a sense of that, of the live stream he took part in this weekend, speaking to the therapist, Dr. Gabor Mate.
Who does a therapy session and broadcasts it live for 18 quid a throw?
People who don't know what we're talking about, Prince Harry did a live stream online, a counselling therapy session with a famous kind of American psychotherapist to talk about everything, to reflect upon his trauma and his drama and his journey. If there is not any more private situation, well, I'll think of one more perhaps private situation, wouldn't want to broadcast the world. But this is the most intimate relationship between the therapist and the patient. And he said, here we go, while saying, give me privacy.
You could watch it if you paid £18.
Yeah, well, £19 actually, but you do get a free copy of the book.
That didn't go to him, did it?
Sorry, well, he would have got the royalties from the book. It was Penguin Random House who set this live stream up, which is the publisher of Prince Harry's memoir. In order to get a ticket, you needed to buy a copy of his book.
If that is not monetising his trauma, I do not know what is.
A man who wanted to go to the United States so he and his wife and their family could be private, invading his privacy again for a vast amount of money.
So Prince Harry actually said on that live stream, because he was asked about his critics, and he said, the more they criticise, the more I feel the need to share. That's a quote from Prince Harry. It was a lot about the trauma from obviously losing his mother at an early age. But the doctor said, and this is the quote, from reading your book, I diagnose you with attention deficit disorder, i.e. not being able to concentrate on situations, but doing it on such a public platform. There are a few mental health charities who have voiced concerns about that, but clearly Prince Harry is his own person. He's no longer a working member of the royal family. He has to make his own income somehow, so perhaps this is his way of doing it.
He's lashing out. He's lashing out.
But that's going to be his next thing now. Now it's going to be all about, he's going to become a campaigner for attention deficit disorder. He's got to constantly reinvent himself in order to stay relevant to the public, in order to keep monetising this, his own life.
Netflix expects.
Netflix expects. He obviously had the Netflix series, then the memoir. He was accused of perhaps playing the victim. Prince Harry denies that. In fact, he denied that in his live stream. He says, I am not the victim in this. So perhaps you're right, Bev. Maybe we will see more of a shift towards trying to do mental health work, or indeed being an advocate for mental health and trying to break the stigma, as he did when he launched Heads Together with his brother Prince William and Catherine, then Duchess of Cambridge. What a blast from the past that was.
Well, I mean, of course, if he is going to start jumping on the ADD bandwagon, that's a different issue. That's not mental health, that's a learning need. Maybe that's where he's going to go next. Oh, Cameron, I'm glad you're going to be there to hold our hand.
Got my work cut out for me.
You've certainly got a busy year.
Right, OK, in case you missed us earlier, we spoke to Nigel Farage about the WhatsApp leaks from former Health Secretary Matt Hancock. Here's what Nigel had to say.
learning an awful lot, aren't we? You know, we're learning, things we've seen this morning. Oh, this is a win for Hancock. As if the whole thing was just some sort of, university game about who comes out with the best political reputation. I think perhaps the most damaging thing so far is the admission that they deliberately tried to terrify the population into compliance. What does that say about a free society? What does it say about our country? I mean, not even in wartime did we treat people like this. And I have to say the conclusion many will draw is that the Conservative Party is simply not fit for office.
So Nigel will be on your telly tonight at 7 o'clock, as always, of course. We are delighted now to be joined by Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platellis back in the studio. And we have a familiar face to the show to this time of the day.
My face has been called many things, and not always familiar.
MP Stephen Pound. Right, Stephen, we're going to get started on Hancock's leaked messages. It's just the gift that keeps on giving this to me.
Well, I find this absolutely extraordinary. And what really worries me about this, I mean, there's a certain humorous aspect to it, because, the guy's got an ego, the size of the Millennium Dome. But what really worries me is the absolute total withering cynicism, frivolity and contempt that he showed. When he talked about there's certain words I just realised I can't use on air, which he described the teaching unions as. Yeah. Which is an extraordinary thing. And then Sir Gavin Williamson saying the teachers are so lazy, they'll do anything to avoid going back to work.
I think he meant the unions, to be fair.
Oh, yes.
But he did, and there is some argument the unions were desperate to keep the teachers out of school.
Yeah, but what worries me is that there's a general perception out there, and you all three of you know this more than as much as anybody, that what we say in private as politicians is very different to what we say in public. Yeah. This absolutely reinforces that divide. And I can hear people, over this weekend, people have been saying, is that what you really think of us? And that worries me. I mean, Hancock has a great deal that we can actually curse him for, and his cruelty to Australian Aboriginal parts and bodies and things, and things, we can do with that.
I love the way you have to watch it.
Segue in a bit of Australia there, Steve.
I was going to say, talking of Australian body parts, Amanda, we talked to you earlier about the WhatsApp messages. Let's tackle the Channel migrant crisis. Rishi Sunak set out to solve a seemingly intractable problem, says all of the newspapers. Is this the solution?
It's desperate politics, is what it is. Basically, they've got, so we know, a year to try and win back some of, especially the Red Wall, people who voted Brexit, to try and have some chance of not being annihilated, and they think this is going to do it for them. I think that the whole thing is fatally flawed because, as they showed in Australia, second reference to Aussie, the only way you solve these is if you deter the illegal immigrants. It's not, it's just...
You mean turning the boats back?
It is just smoke and making it so impossible to get in. It's all just mirrors saying you get rid of the gangs, you get rid of the gangs. No, you stop people from wanting to come on the boats, and that's the only way it works.
Which is what this is aimed to do, right? By saying if you arrive on a boat, you will never be given the opportunity. That's meant to be deterrence.
They haven't put up anything like it. Took Australia about 10 years to put up the infrastructure to actually close their borders, to deter people from coming, and if they did manage to get to Australia, they were instantly put into camps. OK, now that took 10 years to set up. Wow. You've got to build all the camps for a start.
Well, we keep talking, don't we, about putting people in pontins and retired holiday camps, but it never happens.
I don't think that's what Howard said in Australia. I think it was basically at the Highlands. But look, one of the real problems here is the absolute, total, utter, sclerotic incompetence of the Home Office.
Well, that's true.
I just don't think I was 22 years in Parliament, and I don't think I ever came across any department of government which was less capable of doing the most
Didn't your colleague John Reid say just that in 2006 about the Home Office? He said it wasn't fit for purpose.
And Alan Johnson said to me, you can hardly sleep at night knowing that every moment somebody somewhere in the Home Office is doing something which will cause a huge crisis. But look, at the moment, it's a free hit. You come to this country, you set one foot on the beach, and what happens is you get dispersed, you disappear from the hotel, you go and work in a car wash. And I think what we need to do is differentiate between the different types of people coming to this country, the push and the pull. The pull factor, as exemplified by the Albanians, is to come here, no ID cards, no checking up, you can work where you want, and after a few years, marry a local woman or a man, and the next thing you know...
cat.
You've got...
Yes, don't forget the cat.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, well,
somebody got the right to a family life.
To stay here.
Does include the pussy, yes, I agree with that. But the cat... Anyway, the reality is you've got different...
Move on from that, I think. Amanda,
I'm blushing.
Yeah. Genuinely,
it is a true story.
Science seeker invoked the cat.
He said that having a cat, a feline, Steve, having a feline, owning one and looking after it in his home meant that he'd established a right to life here. Yeah. It was an unusual case, but it was true. It was under Theresa May.
Theresa May,
yeah.
Exactly.
But one of the problems we've got is that there are a number of these asylum seekers that are absolutely, totally genuine. And in the old days, they would have applied at the British High Commission. Because I dealt with hundreds, if not thousands of them in my 22 years. And I soon got to a number of the people who are absolutely phony as a 5-bob note.
And what happened to them? They're still here?
Most of them are, because in most cases, I would keep writing to the Home Office and I would actually give information to the Home Office. In a couple of cases about a chap who had 5 different wives, and, it was just appalling. And, he was beating them up. It was just dreadful. The Home Office just doesn't even acknowledge that. So, look, but there are some... Occasionally, I'd meet someone, particularly... I remember in one case, a family from Afghanistan, a woman whose husband had been murdered, whose children were being threatened, and she was a genuine case. She'd pawned everything she'd got to come over here. And I think we have a reputation of being decent people, and we also have a history in Afghanistan. But the problem is, compare that to some scrote from Tirana who's coming across here to get, to work tax-free and take advantage of our benefit system. That's the problem, because they're being tarred with the same brush.
Yeah. OK, let's move on, guys. Prescription charges for the over 60s to be debated by MPs today.
Can I declare an interest?
We're not talking about the over 80s. We're not talking about the over 80s. We're talking about over 60s.
So what's this about, Amanda? And why are people calling for this now? There's a petition, isn't there?
Well, I know from a very good source, i.e. my local pharmacy, that they've already been told it's going to happen. So it basically means by the time, at the moment you get your script free up until, up until 65.
Yeah.
And then after that you have to pay, or you pay for some of them. Anyway, they're going to extend it up until 67, 68.
So they're going to put an even bigger burden on the taxpayer?
Yeah, it will, but that's
unbelievable.
That's what the pharmacists have been told by the government.
Yeah.
So this is like a year ago.
And yet there is many people arguing, aren't they, Stephen, that people who are 60, 61, 62, still working full-time, earning good money... It's
not old.
Why are they getting... It's not old at all. Why are they getting free prescriptions?
The silly thing here is that the solution is there in plain sight at the moment. If you have a chronic condition, a long-term, ongoing condition, you get free prescriptions anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a certain problem, which I don't wish to discuss on air, and, I get free prescriptions and have done since I was in my 50s.
I think we know what that problem is.
Which was many, many years ago.
I think we know all about that, Stephen.
Yeah. Can we move on?
Yes.
I wish I could.
Amanda, I'm not declaring an interest in being over 60 or not, but, I mean, we know lots of people who are in their early 60s who are getting free prescriptions who can easily afford to pay for them. It's mad.
I'm one of them.
Yeah. And you also get, on the tube... TfL, which Transport for London, which has got a deficit of 1.8 billion.
On the other side
free
of that, I'm
transport
sorry
over
about
60.
And I'm not ashamed to declare I'm 65. On the other side of that is the fact that if I've paid into the NHS all my life,
there is that.
and I've hardly ever used it, I use private medical cover. I'm proud to do it to free up space for other people. I'm not ashamed. Why shouldn't I be allowed to get free prescription? And I have got a long-term illness. I don't want any tweets.
Stevens.
I don't want any tweets on what my long-term
but it's not like Stevens.
conditions might be. But why shouldn't we?
But Andrew,
and why should they be making it more difficult?
I used to be a bus conductor in London, and we used to have people called the twirlies, because they'd get on the bus at night and say, "Am I too early?" Because they used to get a free pass. And that, and the twirlies. And so we had these senior citizens passes back in the a long time ago when I was on the buses. But don't forget,
but people didn't live till 95 then.
No.
Because that means you get your free bus pass at 60. You're still using it in 30 years' time.
Fair point. And I think we should.
Oh, it's been so mean today. Why wouldn't old codgers be able to get the buses for free?
Well, speaking as an old codger,
I wasn't talking about you, Steve.
No, but look, at the moment, don't forget they have actually reduced the time. You used to be able to use the senior citizens bus pass any time in the morning. It's now 9 o'clock.
I know.
That's right.
And on some of the TfL ones, it's 9:30.
Right.
So they are shrinking it already. It's like they're extending the retirement age. They're shrinking the time you can use the bus pass.
Yeah. Right. Fairy tale Royal rewrite.
Love
we had
this.
Roald Dahl, and then we had Camilla, the Duchess of Wales. No, what? No,
Cornwall.
Queen Consort.
Queen Consort.
I can't keep up this year.
up.
What their titles are. Queen Consort sort of waded into this kind of obliquely, didn't she?
She did.
She said,
She knew
don't let
exactly what
anybody
she was doing.
suppress your imagination when you're writing. And now we are hearing that classic fairy tales such as Snow White, Cinderella are problematic for promoting all sorts of ideas to impressionable young children. Amanda, do they have a point?
It's a bit more sinister than that, because what they're saying is you can't, in scenes like Cinderella, when you fall mad in love with your prince, you can't refer, you don't know what they're going to refer to themselves as in terms of their own gender. So you can't say he put the slipper on her shoe, because she might be identifying as a trans person, or she may be identifying as gender fluid. And so you just think...
What is really ridiculous about this is one of the things they're objecting to is people swooning. Now, I think I speak for all of us. At some side, we've seen people in our lives who've absolutely fallen head over heels. For, it doesn't often last overnight, but, it does start...
Anne Widdecombe for me.
It's really... well, Shaku Songu. But look, when you think of the stuff in fairy... The Brothers Grimm, and never were brothers more appropriately and aptly named than the Brothers Grimm. You've got people being cooked in ovens, babies being eaten. You've got the most ghastly things happening. Never mind that, park all that lot. But should somebody swoon...
Yeah, but now they're even going after them because they're saying that they're fattest, because Cinderella's really slim and she's got a tiny waist, which is not a good role model for young girls. I mean, give us our Cinderellas.
So Rumpelstiltskin was a person of restricted growth.
Let us believe in princesses before we realise that there's going to be a lot of toads out there we're going to end up kissing.
Well, they're also being accused of being ageist, because they're saying the good characters are always young, the villains tend to be ugly old people, usually women, which promotes ageism. The thing is, the kids can see through this.
Of course they can.
These people who come up with these, they presume that children are stupid and that they're then going to presume that every old person is evil. They don't think like that.
Well, the number of young children who are going to be coming into a room and seeing some aged crone spinning on a wheel there, with a poisoned apple on one side and, and terrified of a prick, and which would then send them to sleep for, 2,000 years or something or other. It's pretty minimal, I would have thought.
Yeah, it is.
Mind you, waiting for the prince to come along and
litter every conversation with a double entendre.
Oh, he does this every week.
I mean, I'm sorry. I went through the script, and if I see any double entendres, I'll whip it out.
I love a bit of Stephen Pound. I can't lie.
Apparently, that's all you'd get.
If there's an entendre to be had, Stephen Pound has it. Stephen, I want to ask you as well about Boris Johnson nominating his father for a knighthood.
Well, I'm just wondering how many members of the family haven't been either ennobled or offered for a knighthood. And it's a great thing, isn't it? I think was it Amanda said, I forgot your birthday, Dad, but never mind. Here's a cake.
Yes, payback time.
There's a lot of stuff in the commission that actually looks into these things. There's some fairly tricky stuff. I mean, Stanley Johnson's ex-wife, well, she's now got longer with us, made some pretty damning comments about his behaviour. So I think it's only like 100 names he's nominated. We thought that Baroness Falkender with the lavender list had done the death.
Harrod Wilson, Marcia Falkender.
Indeed, but 100 names on the resignation. And let's face it, there have been so many prime ministers recently resigning that the House of Lords is already bigger than the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party. It's going to be bursting at the bulkheads.
Right, we have to move on. Amanda Patel, Stephen Pound, thank you so much for joining us on our first show. It has flown by.
Certainly has.
Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst, and he'll be covering the sentencing of former Met police officer Wayne Couzens.
This is To The Point with Andrew and Bev. We'll be back tomorrow at 9:30. See you then.
See you then.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. It's going to be a wintry week. Snow showers across northern Scotland already. And we are going to see further snow across other parts of the country during the coming days. The air is coming down from the Arctic. This area of low pressure has introduced some moisture, and therefore that combination of wet and cold means snow showers are packing in across northern Scotland. This